Chapter 77. Audacious Servant, that's not what you said earlier. Yarrow Enchanting hadn't expected Yuji to say something so shocking. When he had entered, she had thought that Do Xianglan had coughed up blood and died. Everyone shut up. Yuji, speak. Yarrow Sulwan's sharp eyes suddenly shot towards Yarrow Enchanting. Replying Imperial Gui Fei, First Madam caught a cold. Although her body was weak, she wouldn't cough up blood. Today, Consort Yarrow suddenly barged in and sent this servant away. When this servant returned, First Madam was all ready. It was Consort Yarrow. Consort Yarrow must have hated First Madam, that's why she poisoned First Madam to death. Yuji glared at Yarrow Moen angrily. At this moment, everyone's gaze landed on Yarrow Moen. Yuji, you need evidence to speak. You're saying that my master poisoned First Madam, but do you have evidence? Ting Yu immediately stepped forward to refute. When First Madam met with the accident, only Consort Yarrow was present. If it wasn't her, who else could it be? Questioned Yuji sternly. Yarrow Moen. Yarrow Sulwan's eyes were bloodthirsty as she pursed her lips and rushed over. Without saying anything, she slapped Yarrow Moen's face. Niang Niang. Imperial Gui Fei, the matter hasn't been cleared up yet, how could you attack? At the side, Liu Xing hadn't expected Yarrow Sulwan to be so tyrannical. Caught off guard, his master suffered a loss. In reality, if Yarrow Moen hadn't been willing, Yarrow Sulwan wouldn't have had this chance. Yuji. Tell Ben Gong, was mother alone with this bastard before she died? The veins on Yarrow Sulwan's forehead bulged as she spoke through gritted teeth. Yuji dares to guarantee with my life that First Madam was definitely harmed by Consort Yarrow, said Yuji resolutely. Yarrow Moen couldn't help but want to laugh when she saw this. She didn't care about the pain on her face, but these 5 fingerprints covered the ones Yi Junqing had left on her face last night, so she didn't have to explain it to Yi Hongyi. Come. Beat this lowly bastard to death. Yarrow Sulwan roared, her beautiful eyes as cold as ice. Wait, Sulwan. WN is still His Majesty's Consort Yarrow and this matter hasn't been fully investigated yet, so how can you jump to conclusions? Father promises you that once this matter is fully investigated, I will definitely avenge your mother, alright? Yarrow Enchanting had already walked in front of Yarrow Sulwan and advised against it. They say that a day as husband and wife means 100 days of love. Now that her mother had died tragically, not only was her father not punishing the murderer, he was even pleading for her. It's true that she's Consort Yarrow, but this consort is also an imperial noble consort that the emperor has personally bestowed upon her. Furthermore, this consort is pregnant with a descendant of the imperial family. Now that we're in the prime minister's residence, who dares to disobey this consort's words? Guards! Drag this idiot out and beat him to death. Not only did Yarrow Enchanting's persuasion not calm Yarrow Sulwan down, it even aroused the resentment in her heart. Sulwan. Yarrow Enchanting really wanted to say something, but when he saw the bloodthirsty light in Yarrow Sulwan's eyes, he didn't say anything. In his opinion, an imperial noble consort who was pregnant with the emperor's dragon seed was far more valuable than a mere consort Yarrow. Especially when this Yarrow Fei was a fool. Second older sister. Are you suspecting WAN? WAN didn't. Yarrow Mo WN looked towards Yarrow Sulwan with tears in her eyes as she spoke timidly. Guards! All the servants of the Prime Minister's residence have died. Yarrow Sulwan's eyes were about to split open as she roared. The current Yarrow Sulwan had already lost all reason. Every time she thought about Yarrow Mo Shin's soul reincarnating into her belly, that Yarrow Mo WN might have caused her mother's death, she really wanted to rush over and flay Yarrow Mo WN alive. She couldn't make Yarrow Mo Shin turn into ashes, but she could make Yarrow Mo WN die under a random rod. Father! Yarrow Mo Wan's pleading gaze fell on Yarrow Enchanting as tears streamed down her face. Yarrow Mo WN had already expected Yarrow Enchanting to lower his eyes and sigh. At this time, the servants in the courtyard had already rushed into the room and surrounded Yarrow Mo WAN. You've eaten a bear's heart and a leopard's gall. My family's master is the current consort Yarrow Niang Niang and is deeply favored by the emperor. If you dare to touch her, your 9 generations will be implicated. When Liu Xing saw that the situation was bad, He immediately stood in front of Yarrow Mown and shouted angrily. "You're about to die, yet you're still so stubborn. Even these two dog servants, drag both of them out and beat them to death." Yarrow Sulwan's malevolent expression was as terrifying as a demon from hell. When the servants saw that Yarrow Enchanting didn't stop them, they simply rushed over. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint, all the servants in the room collapsed to the ground. In front of Yarrow Mown stood 4 Imperial guards. Why are you all here?" Yarrow Sulwan looked at the Imperial guards that appeared in front of Yarrow Mown in shock. She had been in the palace for 7 years, so she recognized these 4 people. They were all first-rate experts by Yi Hongyi's side. "We've received orders to protect Consort Yarrow. If anyone dares to attack again, kill without mercy," said the leader, Qing Long, in a powerful and resonant voice. "His Majesty actually. Preposterous, she's an idiot. Based on what? Come. Kill Yarrow Mown. Kill her." Yarrow Sulwan couldn't endure the stimulation and her body swayed, almost falling. Fortunately, Cai Ying was supporting her from behind. At this time, Yarrow Enchanting suddenly waved his hand and dismissed the servants on the ground. "Sulwan, don't be willful. Your health is important." When he saw the 4 great Imperial guards appear by Yarrow Mown's side, Yarrow Enchanting was a bit annoyed. However, fortunately, Yarrow Mown was an idiot and probably wouldn't bother with him. When she saw Yarrow Enchanting's ability to act according to the wind to the extreme, Yarrow Mown really wanted to laugh. To have this kind of father, it really was the good fortune she had accumulated over several lifetimes. "Father." Yarrow Sulwan looked towards Yarrow Enchanting with resentment, her anger soaring to the heavens. Right at this time, Su Muzi brought Yarrow Yu and walked in at an inopportune time. The moment she entered, Su Muzi already felt that the atmosphere wasn't right. However, since she had already entered, there was no reason for her to back out. Even if she didn't dare make a sound out of timidity, she still became the focus of Yarrow Sulwan's anger. "Slut." Yarrow Sulwan practically didn't give anyone time to react. She abruptly charged forward and gave Su Muzi a flurry of slaps on her face. "Go away. You're not allowed to bully mother." When Yarrow Yu saw blood seeping out of the corner of Su Muzi's mouth, he anxiously charged forward but was firmly held back by Yu Ji. Now that eldest madam had passed away, she could only perform well in front of Yarrow Sulwan to have a chance at survival. It wasn't that she didn't know that no one in this fu, including Lord Master, wanted her to live. Yarrow Sulwan was her only hope. "Mother, woo-woo." Yarrow Yu's heart ached so much that tears streamed down his face. He struggled with all his might, but he still couldn't escape Yu Ji's grip. Yarrow Enchanting watched indifferently as Yarrow Sulwan slapped Su Muzi until her face was red and swollen and her hair was a mess. He didn't have the slightest intention of stopping her. He knew that Yarrow Sulwan had to find someone to vent her anger on. "Second older sister, how could you hit Shu mother? What did she do wrong?" Yarrow Mown swept a cold gaze over Yarrow Enchanting. She suddenly walked in front of Su Muzi and grabbed Yarrow Sulwan's raised jade wrist. Chapter 78. Shu mother didn't do anything wrong, Moen also didn't do anything wrong. Second older sister just wanted to vent her anger on someone, so hitting Moen is the same. "Hit her." Yarrow Mown stood in front of Su Muzi and loosened her grip on Yarrow Sulwan's wrist. She closed her eyes, clearly looking afraid but not backing down. "Fine. You all heard it. She was the one who asked for it. If anyone dares to stop her, Ben Gong will bestow death upon them. Even if His Majesty comes, it's useless." Yarrow Sulwan's eyes flashed with a vicious light. As she spoke, she raised her palm. Yarrow Mown could clearly hear the wind whistling in her ears. Yarrow Sulwan must have used all her strength in this attack. In the shadows, Yin Shue's gaze was as sharp as an eagle's. As long as Yarrow Mown moved, she would attack. Right at this time, a shout came from outside the door. "Stop!" The ice-cold voice carried a bone-piercing chill. The first thing Yi Hongyi saw when he appeared in Bamboo Wish Pavilion was this shocking scene. When he saw Yarrow Sulwan's palm coming down, his heart inexplicably tightened. Yarrow Sulwan only paused for a moment but didn't have any intentions of stopping. However, Cai Ying pulled her back. Niang Niang, you have to think of the bigger picture, Cai Ying whispered into Yarrow Sulwan's ear. At this time, Yi Hongyi had already stepped into the room and pulled Yarrow Moen into his embrace like he was grabbing a treasure that was about to disappear. Your Majesty. Boo-hoo. It wasn't me who poisoned her. When Di Mother got into trouble, WN was with Shu Mother. Second older sister didn't believe WN. She even beat Shu Mother. Yarrow Moen cried her heart out in Yi Hongyi's embrace, choking with sobs. What's going on? Yi Hongyi's cold eyes surged with anger as he looked at Yarrow Sulwan with a gaze as sharp as a blade. Your Majesty, you have to give this concubine justice. This concubine's mother was poisoned to death by Yarrow Fei. Yuji can testify. Yarrow Sulwan hated Yarrow Moen's wronged appearance and wanted to rush up and tear that face apart. At the side, Yuji's legs softened and she let go of Yarrow Yu's hand. She knelt in front of Yi Hongyi, her body trembling. She had only wanted to curry favor with Yarrow Sulwan and hadn't expected things to get this big. Azure Dragon, investigate. After Yi Hongyi said this, he raised his fingers to stroke Yarrow Moen's wet cheeks. His love for her couldn't be any greater. Wanna doesn't look good when she cries. I don't like it. As Yi Hongyi spoke, he turned around and left Bamboo Wish Pavilion with Yarrow Moen in his arms. He didn't even spare Yarrow Sulwan a glance. At this moment, Yarrow Enchanting finally understood. In His Majesty's eyes, the weight of that foolish daughter was far from what Yarrow Sulwan could compare to. Thus, Yarrow Enchanting got up and straightened his wrinkled gown. He looked in disgust at Do Xianglan, who was lying on the bed like a corpse, and indifferently left. On the ground, Yarrow Sulwan sat there dejectedly, her beautiful eyes burning with tears. Yarrow Moen, one day, this consort will make you die even more miserably than your sister. Because of the Azure Dragon's intervention, the cause of Do Xianglan's death was easily found. 2 hours later, Qinglong appeared in the main hall with the imperial doctor who was examining Do Xianglan again. At this moment, Yi Hongyi was currently comforting Yarrow Moen, who was crying her eyes out. What happened? Yi Hongyi allowed Yarrow Moen to sit on his knees as he swept his gaze over the imperial doctor who was kneeling on the ground. Replying, Your Majesty, Xiongfu's madam did indeed die from poisoning. The poison she was poisoned with is called fallen wild goose sand. This poison is a slow-acting poison. The person who poisoned her mixed this poison into Xiongfu's madam's medicinal soup half a month ago. As the poison accumulated, it caused Xiongfu's madam to suddenly cough up blood and die, reported the imperial doctor. Your Majesty, this subordinate has already investigated. Chen Momo, who had always been brewing medicine for Xiongfu's madam, is currently missing. It has also been confirmed that she was the one who poisoned her. Qinglong cupped his hands as he reported. Imperial Gui Fei, did you hear everything clearly? Yi Hongyi's cold gaze swept over Yarrow Sulwan. There wasn't a trace of warmth in his voice. Chen Momo? How is that possible? Why would she poison Mother? At the side, Yarrow Sulwan wiped her tears as she looked towards Qinglong, replying, Imperial Gui Fei, Chen Momo's daughter had once offended Xiongfu's madam due to a small mistake. Xiongfu's madam beat her up and then threw her out of the fu. She died because she couldn't get medical attention, said Qinglong expressionlessly. Evil woman. Since this matter has nothing to do with WN Imperial Gui Fei, shouldn't you apologize to WAN? When Yi Hongyi saw the finger marks that had yet to disappear on Yarrow Mowan's face, unconcealable anger burst forth from his eyes. It's second older sister who misunderstood WN. WAN wouldn't blame second older sister, right? Yarrow Sulwan's gaze grew cold, but due to Yi Hongyi's face, she had no choice but to walk over to Yarrow Mowan's side and admit her mistake in a low voice. Second older sister's biological mother just died. WAN doesn't blame second older sister, but you shouldn't have hit Shu Mother. Yarrow Mo Wan looked towards Yarrow Sulwan with a heavy sobbing tone. Yarrow Sulwan's heart was stifling with anger, but when she met Yi Hongyi's cold gaze, she turned and walked in front of Su Muzi, who was standing at the side. Sulwan misunderstood Shu Mother because of the pain of losing my mother. I hope that Shu mother will not take it to heart. Yarrow Sulwan clenched her teeth and lowered her eyes, speaking with difficulty. Imperial Gui Fei's words are too serious. This common woman is terrified. Su Muzi immediately kowtowed, not daring to show the slightest bit of disrespect. Forget it, the day after Xiong Fu's madam's funeral, you should stay behind to show your filial piety. Follow Zhen back to the palace. Yi Hongyi pulled Yarrow Mo Wan up and left. Your Majesty, Di mother treats Wan very well. Wan also wants to stay behind. Yarrow Mo Wan's beautiful eyes sparkled as she looked towards Yi Hongyi, innocent and pure. It was unknown whether she was angry or amused. Do Xianglan would treat Yarrow Mo Wan well? Even a ghost wouldn't believe it. Zhen's foolish Wan. Let's go. Yi Hongyi pulled Yarrow Mo Wan to the door when he suddenly thought of something and turned to look towards Yarrow Zhenting. Which lowly servant framed Yarrow Fei? Chapter 79. Niang Niang, dinner is ready. Ting Yu placed the last dish of koi pastries on the table and walked over to Yarrow Moan's side. Yen, has it been prepared for the esteemed prince? Yarrow Moan sighed and put down Fluffy to walk over to the table. This servant has already delivered the esteemed prince's portion. All right, you guys should go eat as well. There's no need to serve here. Yarrow Moan waved her hand to dismiss Ting Yu and Liu Xing. She looked at the table full of dishes and finally had some appetite. Just as Yarrow Moan was about to move her chopsticks, a faint fragrance drifted over. Yarrow Moan didn't look up as she continued to eat. That girl Ting Yu is also holding a grudge. Why did she give this prince so little food? This prince hasn't even eaten his fill. Yi Junqing walked in elegantly in his white robes. There was a rare trace of awkwardness on his handsome face, even though he was trying his best to hide it. It seems like you can't eat that much. Seeing that Yarrow Moan wasn't saying anything, Yi Junqing tried to smooth things over and sat down. I heard you returned to the Prime Minister residence. You weren't wronged, right? Yi Junqing was glad that there were 2 sets of chopsticks on the table. He picked up the bamboo chopsticks and was about to pick up some food when Yarrow Moan suddenly put down the porcelain bowl and looked towards Yi Junqing indifferently. Yi Junqing's raised hand instantly froze in the air. He didn't know whether to extend it or retract it. After a while, he finally lowered it. All right, this prince came to admit his wrongs. I shouldn't have hit you, but you were also in the wrong. Yi Junqing looked towards Yarrow Moan with a serious expression. Moan's wrongs were that when Prince attacked, I didn't dodge in time. A ripple appeared in Yarrow Moan's clear eyes and her voice was as pleasant as a clear spring. If you say it like that. When Yi Junqing saw the finger marks on Yarrow Moan's face, he swallowed back the words he was about to say. It was hard to imagine how hard he had hit her to still be able to see the marks. Is what Moan said wrong? Yarrow Moan lifted her brows with a calm expression. Yes. Yi Junqing's heart was crying. How much did he have to say the word yes against his will? So that's what Prince thinks. Prince can leave now. Yarrow Moan's expression darkened and her voice turned extremely cold. That's not right. Yi Junqing's attitude instantly changed. In this moment, Yi Junqing deeply understood that if he insisted on his principles when a woman was pestering him endlessly, it would definitely be self-torture. Perhaps in Prince's eyes, Moan has never been right. Prince can leave now. Yarrow Moan once again ordered for him to leave. Yi Junqing finally gave up. He lowered his head, put down his chopsticks, and silently left. As she watched Yi Junqing dejectedly walk out of Guan Osprey Palace, Yarrow Moan's lips curved into a faint smile. She liked the current Yi Junqing. He was able to feel joy, anger, sorrow, and joy. He wasn't as dejected as he was at the esteemed prince's residence. Just as Yi Junqing's figure faded from her line of sight, a gust of wind blew and a figure in a red dress appeared in front of her like a god descending. His androgynous handsome face was unparalleled in the world. Yang Nansheng was truly beautiful to the extreme. Just a glance was enough to make all living things go crazy. Aren't beauties being too much of a bully? Yang Nansheng flicked his sleeves and sat down in front of Yarrow Moan. His charming eyes looked in the direction Yi Junqing had disappeared in. In this world, other than Yarrow Morshin, there was no one else who could make her junior brother feel so helpless. They were truly worthy of being blood sisters. Alliance Head wants to stand up for the esteemed prince. Yarrow Moen restrained the shock in her eyes and lifted her brows towards Yang Nansheng. Cough cough. I don't have that thought for now. I came here specifically to see Miss Moen. When Yang Nansheng noticed the strange light in Yarrow Moen's eyes, he decisively chose to play it safe. Is there nothing else? Yarrow Moen lifted her brows towards Yang Nansheng. Her clear eyes seemed to have the power to see through people's hearts. Under the gaze of these eyes, Yang Nansheng suddenly felt like he was running around naked. No. Yang Nansheng shook his head firmly. That's for the best. Since you've already seen her, Moen won't keep you company. It's been a long day and I'm really tired. Yarrow Moen swayed as she got up and headed for the bedroom. Don't go. I have something good to show you. Wind, rain, thunder, lightning. When Yang Nansheng's voice fell, 4 people dressed in black stood in front of Yarrow Moen. There were 2 men and 2 women. The men were handsome and elegant while the women were dignified. As for their martial arts, they naturally weren't bad if Yang Nansheng could call them good stuff. What do you mean? Yarrow Moen sized up the 4 people in front of her, then turned to look at Yang Nansheng. In reality, she had already guessed what was going on. Don't underestimate these 4 people. They're this sovereign's most capable left and right arms. Yang Nansheng gave the 4 people in front of him the highest evaluation. And then, Yarrow Moen placed her thumb on her cheek as her crafty eyes flickered towards Yang Nansheng. Her lips curved into a smile that was like a little flower swaying in the spring breeze, so pure and innocent. And then, this sovereign has decided to give the 4 of them to you. Yang Nansheng said resolutely as if he had mustered up a lot of courage. Amen. Moen once heard someone say that the more beautiful a thing is, the more it's not what it looks like. It seems that's not entirely true. Nansheng, you're a city-toppling beauty and have a generous heart is an example. Then Moen will respectfully accept. Wind, rain, thunder, lightning, all of you withdraw. Yarrow Moen rarely complimented someone. Don't withdraw. Yang Nansheng was just about to stop them when he saw Yarrow Moen's sharp eyes turn cold as she looked at wind, rain, thunder, and lightning solemnly. Who's your master now? Withdraw. Yarrow Moen's voice was very soft, but it contained a pressure that no one could refuse. Wind, rain, thunder, and lightning only froze for a moment before they all disappeared from Guan Osprey Palace. Chapter 80. Didn't you specially come to see me? Yarrow Moen looked towards Yang Nansheng innocently. That's right, but you've already taken the elements, so shouldn't you return Yin Shui to this sovereign? Yang Nansheng said as if this was a matter of course. Are these 2 matters related? Yarrow Moen had already guessed Yang Nansheng's intentions, but she wasn't a kind person. How could she let go of a duck that was already in her hands? Furthermore, Yarrow Moen knew from Yin Shui that all hidden guards were only loyal to their current master. Regarding this, Yarrow Moen firmly believed it. You won't go back on your word, right? Yang Nansheng's beautiful peach blossom eyes widened to their limit and his voice trembled slightly. The woman in front of him was clearly as beautiful as a flower, a beauty that could topple a nation, but at this moment, no matter how he looked at her, she seemed like a devil, the most black-bellied kind. If Alliance Head doesn't feel embarrassed, then you can take the elements back from Moen. As for Yin Shui, Moen definitely won't part with her. Of course, Moen feels that a proud martial alliance head like Yang Nansheng wouldn't do something that goes back on his word. If that's really the case, then Moen will look down on you. Yarrow Moen's words were light and breezy, but they completely blocked Yang Nansheng's path of retreat. I want the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning back. Yang Nansheng's voice was extremely soft. His flawless face was dyed with an unnatural redness. Nansheng, what did you say? Moen didn't hear you. Speak louder. Yarrow Moen rubbed her ear and deliberately raised her voice. I said, I want the elements back. Yang Nansheng cleared his throat, pursed his lips, and raised his voice slightly. What a joke, there were only 8 first-class hidden guards in Phoenix Feather Manor. How could he bear to give them away? I still can't hear you. What did you say? Yarrow Moen pretended to be deaf and mute again. Yang Nansheng was silent for a moment, then he suddenly rushed over to Yarrow Moen's ear and said loudly, "The elements are yours, no need to thank me." Yarrow Moen felt her eardrums ringing. By the time she reacted, Yang Nansheng had already left Guan Osprey Palace with vicious steps. Yarrow Moen smiled faintly as she looked at Yang Nansheng's downtrodden figure. "Trying to fight with me?" Perhaps it was because of the wind, rain, thunder, and lightning, but Yarrow Moen was in a very good mood. So the next morning, when Yi Junqing sat down at the jadeite square table and offered a bowl of ginseng porridge, Yarrow Moen didn't refuse. "Does Prince sincerely repent?" Yarrow Moen took the ginseng porridge and lifted her brows towards Yi Junqing. "Ahem. Regarding that matter, this king was indeed at fault. Of course, if one makes a mistake, then they should be punished. As long as you ask, this prince is willing to take responsibility for this mistake." Yi Junqing seemed to have hardened his heart as he enunciated each word with a sincere gaze and sincere tone. "From tomorrow onwards, Prince shouldn't appear in front of Moen wearing white clothes anymore," said Yarrow Moen lightly as she scooped up the ginseng porridge from her porcelain bowl. "Why?" Yi Junqing did his best to make his voice sound calm. "Because I made a mistake, so I should be punished." Yarrow Moen blinked slightly as she looked towards Yi Junqing with an innocent expression. Yarrow Moen knew that white wasn't a color that Yi Junqing liked. Ever since the day the news of his death had reached the esteemed prince's residence, he had started wearing white clothes. He wanted to use white to mourn the woman in his heart, to show that his heart was dead, but how could he have known that that woman wouldn't be willing to see his heart die? Yi Junqing silently withdrew his gaze and began to gulp down the porridge. It was rare for Yarrow Moen to see Yi Junqing acting in a fit of pique. The two sword-like brows on his handsome face were tightly knitted together. It was extremely funny. After finishing breakfast, Yarrow Moen got up to pick up Fluffy and walked out of Guan Osprey Palace. Just as she was about to leave, she seemed to think of something. "Ting Yu, if you see that Prince is still wearing white clothes tomorrow, send the food to the East Wing." The meaning behind Yarrow Moen's words was very clear. Ting Yu nodded in understanding. Behind Yarrow Moen, the sound of Yi Junqing drinking the porridge grew louder. After leaving Guan Osprey Palace, Yarrow Moen called Liu Xing over. "Liu Xing, go investigate Su Muzi. See who she usually interacts with and if there are any suspicious people." "Yes." Liu Xing never asked for the reason for Yarrow Moen's orders. He only said that he would do his best. From the moment he decided to become a eunuch, his body, his life, all belonged to Yarrow Moen. After Do Xianglan's funeral was settled, Yarrow Sulwan hurriedly returned to the imperial palace. However, after waiting for a few days, she still didn't see Yi Hongyi step foot into Pure Flower's palace. "Your Highness, how can the child in your stomach endure this if you don't eat or drink? Shouldn't he at least eat some?" Cai Ying carefully brought the ginseng porridge in front of Yarrow Sulwan, but Yarrow Sulwan abruptly threw it to the ground. "It's better if he starves to death." "What dragon seed? It's that vile spawn Yarrow Morshin. How did you end up in Ben Gong's stomach? Get out. Hurry and get out." Yarrow Sulwan was extremely angry and her hands hit her lower abdomen with all her might. "Your Highness, what are you doing? It's easy to miscarry like this. You have to take care of your own body." Cai Ying couldn't be bothered to clean up the mess on the ground and hastily stopped Yarrow Sulwan. "What did you say?" Yarrow Sulwan suddenly stopped and looked towards Cai Ying with a deep gaze. This servant said to take care of your body. It's easy for you to miscarry like this." Cai Ying repeated timidly. "Miscarry. That really is a good idea. Help Ben Gong dress up. Ben Gong wants to see His Majesty." Yarrow Sulwan's eyes brightened and the corners of her lips curved in a chilly smile. Inside the imperial study, Yi Hongyi finished reading the last memorial and put down the cinnabar brush. He let out a light sigh and then lazily leaned back on the dragon chair. Yarrow Mo Wan's otherworldly appearance unconsciously appeared in his mind. If it wasn't for the fact that he had to weigh the important ministers in court, why would he need to visit the 4 great imperial concubines from time to time? No one knew how much he relied on Yarrow Mo Wan's body. Every time he interacted with the other concubines, he would unconsciously think that the woman beneath him was Yarrow Mo Wan. Your Majesty, Imperial Gui Fei is outside and requests an audience. And Bingshan's voice interrupted Yi Hongyi's contemplation. Summon. Yi Hongyi restrained the warmth that had unconsciously appeared in his eyes and spoke seriously. In a short while, Yarrow Sulwan had already arrived in front of the dragon table with small steps. This concubine kowtows in salute to your Majesty. Yarrow Sulwan parted her lips and her graceful body bent down in the most seductive position. Chapter 81. This matter is already in the past, we won't pursue it. Yi Hongyi's expression didn't change. Other than this matter, this concubine has come to share your Majesty's burden. Yarrow Sulwan put away the sorrow in her eyes and looked towards Yi Hongyi. Light flashed in her eyes. Oh! Yi Hongyi was slightly shocked and raised his brows. This Kia remembers that your Majesty once mentioned that General of the Left, Huan Heng, holds half of Great Chu's military power and is ready to make a move. Unfortunately, Huan Heng has always been cautious and your Majesty doesn't have a way to deal with him right now, said Yarrow Sulwan in a low voice. That's right. Does beloved concubine have any good suggestions? His deep eyes became even more focused. Yi Hongyi slowly walked around the dragon table and walked lightly to Yarrow Sulwan's side. As gently as he could, he helped her sit on a red sandalwood chair to the side. This concubine is slow-witted, but I can think of a way. If Consort Chen makes a huge mistake, the father has to pay the son's debts. In order to protect Consort Chen's life, Left General shouldn't be stingy with his military power. Yarrow Sulwan's eyes flashed. That won't be easy. Zhen really can't think of what kind of mistake Consort Chen could make that Zhen would have enough reason to use her. Yi Hongyi looked towards Yarrow Sulwan in confusion. The imperial harem is the most powerful, no one can surpass the descendants of dragons, said Yarrow Sulwan clearly. Sulwan, do you know what you're saying? How could you bear to? This is your and Zhen's child. Yi Hongyi suddenly trembled, then looked towards Yarrow Sulwan solemnly. This concubine is terrified. How could this concubine bear to give up my own flesh and blood? This is this concubine's first child. However, this concubine really can't think of a better idea. Zhen and this concubine will have another child, but if Huan Heng does anything, Great Chu will be in danger. This concubine only wants to do something for your Majesty and Great Chu. I beg your Majesty to help me. Yarrow Sulwan suddenly knelt down with tears in her eyes. However, a trace of coldness flashed through her heart. Back then, her pregnancy wasn't even as good as a cat for His Majesty. Now, his heart was aching. This was too fake. Some things were tacit, but they still had to keep up appearances. Beloved concubine, hurry and get up. Sulwan, we never thought that you would be so righteous. It's just that this matter has wronged you. Don't worry, after this matter is over, we will compensate you. Yi Hongyi lovingly helped Yarrow Sulwan up from the ground, a gentle smile appearing in his cold and emotionless eyes. This concubine only wants to do her part for your Majesty and has never thought of a reward. Yarrow Sulwan bashfully leaned into Yi Hongyi's embrace, feeling a moment of warmth. Her mind was already filled with the limitless glory of sitting on the Phoenix throne. She believed that if they could help His Majesty eliminate Huan Heng this time, she would definitely become the Empress. Yarrow Mo Wan, who was leisurely strolling through the imperial garden, carried Fluffy and walked to a more secluded place. Seeing that there was no one around, she tried to summon wind, rain, thunder, and lightning. Just like Yin Shui, Yarrow Mo Wan only had to shout once and the four of them seemed to have descended from the heavens to stand in front of her respectfully. Since this consort is your master, will you listen to this consort's words? Yarrow Moan looked towards the four people with a solemn expression. This consort awaits master's orders, said the four of them in unison. This consort orders the four of you to immediately head to Meng Yuan. After you find Ben Lei, help him gather as much wealth as possible and secretly expand the secret division. Tell Ben Lei to be careful when he does things and not give himself away. In particular, don't let the Crown Prince of Shu, Chu Morbei, get hold of any evidence. This person is very difficult to deal with. Yarrow Moen suddenly felt a headache when she recalled her dealings with Chu Morbei. This person's calm bearing, deep schemes, and strange methods were already at the top of the list of people she didn't want to deal with the most. Yes. Wind, rain, thunder, and lightning received the order and left. When the four of them faded out of her sight, Yarrow Moen summoned Yin Shui. Are there any movements on Yarrow Sulwan's side? Ever since Yarrow Sulwan had returned from Prime Minister Fu, Yarrow Moen had sent Yin Shui out to secretly monitor her. There was a saying that a cornered dog would jump over a wall. Yarrow Sulwan was currently in this state. Replying, Master, Yarrow Sulwan wants to use the dragon seed in her stomach to frame Huan Kia, replied Yin Shui concisely. How sad. Never mind, someone like her isn't fit to be a mother. Do you know what method to use? Yarrow Moen's expression was solemn as a dark light flashed through her eyes. She didn't know what words to use to describe Yarrow Sulwan's foolish actions. At the time, she had been too sharp, which was why Yi Hongyi couldn't tolerate her. She clearly knew that Yi Hongyi couldn't tolerate a shrewd woman, yet she just had to be ahead of him in everything. If she knew her place and didn't try to be the empress, perhaps she would have been able to live a bit longer. Saffron, said Yin Shui resolutely. What a foolish move. Yarrow Moen laughed coldly, then lifted her eyes to look at the jade lake in front of her. A gust of wind blew over the lake, bringing with it a trace of moisture. The jade-colored lake water shimmered, dazzling the eyes. Huan Kia had appeared in Pure Flower's palace far earlier than Yarrow Sulwan had imagined. When she saw the black chicken ginseng soup in Zi Shuang's hands, a trace of sorrow flashed through Yarrow Sulwan's heart. She had abandoned this child because of Yarrow Morshin, but His Majesty couldn't wait to abandon him. What did this mean? What gust of wind blew little sister Kia to this consort's place? Yarrow Sulwan collected her thoughts and swayed as she walked towards Huan Kia. This consort has never been one to be pretentious, nor would I say any flattering words. If His Majesty hadn't repeatedly told this consort to come see Imperial Gui Fei last night, this consort would never have stepped into your Pure Flowers palace. This consort hasn't forgotten who it was that instructed that idiot to push this consort into Jade Lake. Huan Kia looked coldly at Yarrow Sulwan, who had come forward to greet her. Her voice was as cold as a hammer, pushing people 1,000 li away. At the side, Zi Shuang expressionlessly placed the food box in her hands on the table before returning to stand behind Huan Kia. Chapter 82. Ben Gong has accepted Consort Chen's goodwill. Since Consort Chen is so reluctant, Ben Gong doesn't need to stay any longer. Yarrow Sulwan looked towards Huan Kia. She knew that Huan Kia was very domineering, so she didn't bother arguing with her. At least you're sensible. Zi Shuang, let's go. Although Huan Kia was a bit surprised by Yarrow Sulwan's submissive attitude, she didn't think too much about it. Ben Gong won't take anything that's taken into Pure Flower's palace. Huan Kia scoffed when she saw that Zi Shuang was about to take back the porcelain bowl and food box. Zi Shuang naturally understood her master's meaning and immediately put down the food box in her hands before turning to leave with Huan Kia. Niang Niang, this Huan Kia is too domineering. Why do you have to tolerate her? In any case, there's plenty of time in the future. Once she's banished to the cold palace, Ben Gong will have plenty of time to torment her. At that time, Ben Gong will let her know who's the real master in this inner palace. Yarrow Sulwan narrowed her eyes. When she turned around, she suddenly felt an unbearable pain in her abdomen. Niang Niang, is it? This servant will help you back to your room. When Cai Ying saw Yarrow Sulwan's brows furrowed and her expression conflicted, she knew that the saffron had taken effect and immediately helped Yarrow Sulwan back to the inner room. On the white jade bridge in the Imperial Garden, Huan Kia walked leisurely as she admired the beautiful scenery in the garden. Niang Niang, this servant feels that Imperial Gui Fei's attitude today is a bit strange. Ever since Zi Shuang left Pure Flower's palace, she had been feeling uneasy. That's true. Ben Gong scolded her like that, but she didn't even say a word in rebuttal. Could it be that she's afraid of Ben Gong? Although Huan Kia was used to being domineering, she wasn't a brainless person. Yarrow Sulwan's attitude was indeed abnormal. She was so patient that she didn't even use the words she had prepared. It's fine if she's afraid of Niang Niang, but this servant is just afraid that she'll harm Niang Niang behind your back. You must know that it's better to offend a gentleman than a villain. That Yarrow Sulwan is a smiling tiger through and through, Zi Shuang commented. Just as Huan Kia was about to speak, she suddenly saw Yarrow Mo Wan and Ting Yu taking a stroll in the willow forest. Zi Shuang, follow this consort to teach that idiot a lesson. Huan Kia's eyes turned cold as she walked towards the willow forest. Inside the willow forest, the shade was lush and green. 10,000 weeping willows swayed in the wind like silk ribbons. Yarrow Mo Wan lightly swung the willow branch in her hand, her large eyes as clear as water. Ting Yu, what do you think second older sister's red powder is? Ting Yu, what do you think second older Jez Palace has? You mustn't eat it, that thing is poisonous. Ting Yu intentionally raised her voice and exclaimed. Nonsense. If it was poisonous, why would second sister put it in the secret compartment under the bed? It must be something delicious. Second older sister couldn't bear to let Wn eat it, so she hid it. Yarrow Moan noticed that Huan Kia's footsteps had suddenly stopped, so she continued to act innocent. That's called saffron. If you eat it, you won't be able to have children. Even if you're pregnant, eating it will cause a miscarriage. Niang Niang, this isn't a joke. You definitely can't eat it, do you understand? Ting Yu's expression was extremely exaggerated and she placed great emphasis on the word saffron. Then why did second older sister keep it? I'll go tell second older sister, Yarrow Mo Wan said. Can't, don't go. If Imperial Gui Fei finds out that you saw the secret compartment under her bed, she won't forgive you. You mustn't tell anyone about this. Ting Yu warned again and again. I know. Ting Yu, let's go to the pavilion over there and see if that bad woman is still there. If she is, then we'll help second older sister push her into the water. In any case, His Majesty won't scold Wn. Yarrow Mo Wan winked mischievously, then turned and ran towards the pavilion. Can't, don't run so fast. Be careful not to fall. Ting Yu hurriedly followed. In the shadows of the willow forest, Huan Kia's brows furrowed. Her cold eyes were like frost. Can't, if what that idiot said was true, this servant doesn't understand. Why did Yarrow Sulwan prepare saffron? She's the only pregnant person in the palace right now. Zi Shuang thought about it but couldn't come to a conclusion. Could it be? Zi Shuang, do you think she would take the saffron herself and then frame Ben Gong? Huan Kia's eyes flashed with an indistinguishable light as she looked towards Zi Shuang in panic. Even a vicious tiger doesn't eat its cubs. Furthermore, His Majesty doesn't have a son. If she gave birth to a male child, the position of Empress would be within reach. Why would she give up her beautiful future just to spite Kont? This doesn't make sense. Zi Shuang disagreed. That's true. Perhaps she prepared it long ago. It seems that the frequent miscarriages among the consorts in the past definitely have something to do with her. Huan Kia sighed lightly. Just as she was about to turn and leave, she suddenly saw a little palace made from pure flowers palace pass by with Imperial Physician Zheng. Isn't that a palace made from pure flowers palace? Could something really have happened to Yarrow Sulwan? Zi Shuang looked towards Imperial Physician Zheng in shock as a wave of unease rose in her heart. Before Zi Shuang's voice fell, she saw a group of Imperial guards run over from Pure Flowers Palace. Yarrow Sulwan is truly vicious enough. Zi Shuang, hurry and hide. Later, think of a way to leave the palace and tell father everything that Yarrow Mo Wan just said. Hurry. Huan Kia had already realized the urgency of the situation and ordered Zi Shuang sternly. Zi Shuang didn't dare to dally and immediately hid in a nearby bush. In the next second, that group of Imperial guards had already surrounded Huan Kia. According to His Majesty's decree, Consort Chen is requested to make a trip to Pure Flowers Palace. Seeing that her master was in trouble, Zi Shuang's heart trembled and she rushed towards the palace gates without a second thought. In the darkness, Yarrow Mo Wan slowly walked out of the willow forest. Her eyes that were as black as midnight stared in the direction that Zi Shuang had left in and a knowing smile flashed across her lips. Niang Niang, Imperial Gui Fei is going to be out of luck, said Ting Yu. It's not just Yarrow Sulwan who's going to be out of luck. Have you found someone to inform father? Niang Niang, don't worry. Liu Xing has already arranged for someone to report to master. Ian, let's go. Accompany Ben Gong to watch the show. Yarrow Mo Wan's expression returned to its usual cold and indifferent expression. The depths of her eyes were so deep that no one could see them. Inside Pure Flower's palace, Yarrow Sulwan's hands were tightly clutching her lower abdomen as she cried heart-wrenchingly. The brocade blankets and satin mattresses were all stained with dark red blood. It was a ghastly sight. When Huan Kia was escorted in, the first thing she saw was this kind of miserable scene. Consort Chen, my family's Niang Niang has tolerated you time and time again. I didn't expect that you would have such a poisonous heart and cause my master to lose her child. Your Majesty, this servant begs you to uphold justice for Imperial Gui Fei. She just experienced the pain of losing her mother and now she's lost her dragon seed. Niang Niang, how can she endure this? Snot and tears streamed down Xia Ying's face as she knelt in front of Yi Hongyi and kowtowed with all her might. Consort Chen, how do you explain this matter? Yi Hongyi's expression was grave and his gaze was like ice. Imperial Gui Fei losing her child has nothing to do with this consort at all, so this consort doesn't need to explain. Her clear and cold voice was filled with unconcealable disgust and disdain. Zi Shuang was right. Even a vicious tiger wouldn't eat its cubs. She hadn't expected that Yarrow Sulwan's heart would be this vicious. She really wasn't even comparable to an animal. The evidence is conclusive, yet you still want to deny it. Yi Hongyi's dark and cold eyes were like the eyes of a wild wolf in the night, suffused with a deep and cold light. May I ask where the evidence Your Majesty speaks of is? Huan Kia couldn't say whether or not she loved Yi Hongyi. She had only entered the palace to solidify Huan family's position in the court. She had been determined to do this her entire life and was never tired of it. However, Huan Kia was a bit stunned by Yi Hongyi's heartlessness. Last night, this man had still been extremely gentle on her bed. Now, he had become extremely unfamiliar. Chapter 83. Consort Chen, you're slandering me. For the sake of peace in the inner palace, Ben Gong has endured everything humbly and made concessions again and again. However, Ben Gong didn't expect you to be this vicious and actually harm my imperial son. Now, not only are you not admitting your wrongs, you're even putting the cart before the horse and framing Ben Gong. Your Majesty, you have to get justice for this consort and get revenge for my imperial son. Yarrow Sulwan hadn't expected that Huan Kia would be this calm and hesitated. She couldn't be wrong. Consort Chen, before this matter is investigated clearly, Jin can only wrong you. Come, banish Consort Chen into the cold palace. Yi Hongyi's goal was very clear. As long as Huan Kia was banished into the cold palace, Huan Heng would definitely hand over his military power to save his daughter. Your Majesty, this consort has been wronged. This consort. Huan Kia knew very well that if she left Pure Flower's palace now, some things wouldn't be cleared up. Just as she was about to say Yarrow Moen, a shocked voice suddenly rang out. Second older sister? Second older sister, what's wrong? Why is there so much blood? Yarrow Moen's sudden appearance bought time for Huan Kia. At this moment, everyone's gazes were focused on Yarrow Moen, especially Yi Hongyi. Why did you come? Seeing Yarrow Moen's pale face, Yi Hongyi's heart ached to the extreme. He instantly let go of Yarrow Sulwan and walked forward to protect Yarrow Moen in his arms. Heard that something happened to second older sister, so I came to see. Your Majesty, what happened to second older sister? Yarrow Mo Wn looked towards Yi Hongyi with teary eyes, tears swirling in her eyes. Her long eyelashes were stained with dew-like sparkling teardrops. In the blink of an eye, the tears fell to the ground with a pitter-patter, causing countless drops of colored glass to fall on Yi Hongyi's heart. Second older sister's child is gone. It was Consort Chen. She was jealous that second older sister was pregnant and also hated you for pushing her into the water, so, she poisoned second older sister's child. When Yarrow Sulwan saw that Yi Hongyi had forgotten his proper business and rushed to Yarrow Moen's side without a care in the world, Yarrow Sulwan forcefully suppressed the flames of jealousy in her heart. She cried out in grief, and the hand that was pointing at Huan Kia trembled like a loom. From her point of view, although Yarrow Moen was completely stupid, it wasn't completely without benefits. At the very least, Yarrow Sulwan felt that this idiot still had her, this second older sister, in her heart. Blood. So much blood. Woo woo. WNR is so scared, Your Majesty. WAN's afraid of blood. Yarrow Moen completely treated Yarrow Sulwan's words as fart. Her hands tightly wrapped around Yi Hongyi's waist as she cried. Don't be afraid, Wana. What are you guys still standing there for? Get rid of these bloodstains. When Yi Hongyi saw the person in his arms trembling like a leaf in the wind, his eyes suddenly became fierce and he shouted angrily. On the bed, Yarrow Sulwan's beautiful eyes were bloodshot and her lips were deathly pale. Her slender fingers gripped the brocade blanket and her eyes were filled with resentment. Although it was a scheme, she didn't have a child. Her stomach felt like it was being pricked by needles and her body was weak. Compared to Yarrow Moen, did she not need to be protected? At the side, Huan Kia closed her mouth. She thought that Yarrow Moen had come at the right time and was glad that she hadn't mentioned Yarrow Moen. His Majesty doted on this idiot so much. If she was involved, this matter would be difficult to handle. Fortunately, the evidence was conclusive. When father came later, she would definitely make Yarrow Sulwan regret her actions. Yarrow Moen only stopped crying when the palace maids finished changing the bloodstained bedding. She jogged over to the bed. Second older sister, you must be in a lot of pain, right? Yarrow Moen's tear-stained face was pitiful. But in Yarrow Sulwan's eyes, it was repulsive. What do you think? Yarrow Sulwan enunciated each word, hatred growing in her heart. It must be very painful. Yarrow Moen raised her hand to stroke Yarrow Sulwan's stomach, the light in her eyes indistinguishable. In the cold palace, when she had hugged Zhong-er, she had felt a lot of pain. It was as if there were icicles falling from the sky and every time they landed on her body, it would bring her unbearable pain. Take it away. Yarrow Sulwan shook off Yarrow Moen's hand in disgust. She was just about to push this eyesore idiot away, but when she met Yi Hongyi's deep eyes, she resisted the urge to rush to her head. Second older sister. Yarrow Moen looked towards Yarrow Sulwan innocently, but in the next second, she was pulled back into Yi Hongyi's embrace. Your Majesty, this subject's Kie's hatred for losing my son, you can't ignore it. Yarrow Sulwan wiped her tears in grief and intentionally reminded him. Come, banish consort Chen into the cold palace. Yi Hongyi instantly regained his clarity after Yarrow Sulwan's reminder and ordered coldly. Just as Huan Kia was about to refute, and Bingshan suddenly jogged in from outside. Your Majesty, General Huan requests an audience. When this was said, Huan Kia's heart finally calmed down. On the bed, Yarrow Sulwan reflexively looked towards Yi Hongyi, a trace of suspicion flashing through her eyes. How long had it been since this happened? How did the news get out of the palace so quickly? Summon. How could Yi Hongyi not be extremely shocked? However, Huan Heng was right outside the palace, so there was no reason to chase him away. A moment later, a middle-aged man about 50 years old dressed in martial attire walked into Pure Flower's palace with steady steps. This subject Huan Heng kowtows in salute to Your Majesty, kowtows in salute to Imperial Noble Consort, Consort Yarrow, Consort Chen. The sonorous voice was powerful and resounding. It was obvious that this person's martial arts were very high and his inner strength was very strong. Rise, beloved official Huan has come at the right time. This matter is giving Jin a headache. Since Huan Heng had run into it, he might as well lay his cards on the table now. May I ask what matter has Your Majesty so worried? Huan Heng had always been calm. Although he knew the whole story, he chose to endure it and let Yi Hongyi speak first. At this time, An Bingshan appeared again. Your Majesty, Prime Minister Daran is outside and requests an audience. An Bingshan looked at the people in this room, a dark light flashing through his eyes. It seemed that today was going to be lively. Summon. Yi Hongyi raised his hand to indicate. A moment later, Yarrow Junting also walked in from outside the palace. This subject kowtows in salute to Your Majesty, Imperial Gui Fei, Yarrow Fei, Chen Fei. The moment he entered, Yarou Zhenting suppressed the doubts in his heart and bowed respectfully. The message from the palace had only said that Imperial Gui Fei wasn't feeling well and summoned him into the palace. However, it seemed that the matter wasn't that simple. Your Majesty, even if the Son of Heaven breaks the law, he will be punished the same as the common people. Even if Chen Fei is General Huan's pearl and Your Majesty's beloved Fei, she still killed the dragon seed in Sulwan's womb. If Your Majesty doesn't punish her, how can Sulwan endure this? Yarou Sulwan broke the strange atmosphere in the palace and wept sorrowfully. General Huan, you heard it too. Chen Fei is easily jealous and actually put saffron in Imperial Gui Fei's medicine, causing Imperial Gui Fei to miscarry. This matter concerns the dragon descendant of Great Chu imperial family. Even if Zhen has the heart to forgive Chen Fei, Zhen cannot disregard the law. Yi Hongyi's rebuke was dignified as he looked towards Huan Heng with a conflicted expression. At the side, Yarou Zhenting was shocked when he heard this. His deep eyes subconsciously turned towards Yarou Sulwan, but in the end, they landed on Yarou Mo Wn, who was in Yi Hongyi's embrace. An indescribable emotion appeared in his eyes. Yarou Mo Wn knew that her excellent father was definitely weighing the position of his two daughters in His Majesty's heart in order to determine who he should curry favor with in the future. Your Majesty's words are correct. If Chen Fei is guilty, she will naturally be punished. This subject will definitely not be biased. However, this subject hopes that Your Majesty can investigate this matter clearly and not wrongly accuse Chen Fei. Huan Heng's expression was solemn as he cupped his hands. Chapter 84. Even if this ginseng soup was tampered with before it entered Consort Chen's hands, it still came from Consort Chen's little kitchen. Consort Chen has an undeniable responsibility. Yarou Sulwan covered her face and wiped away her tears as she retorted. So there's only one point of suspicion left. Someone deliberately framed Consort Chen in order to eliminate dissident. Your Majesty should severely punish this person. Don't let this kind of filth taint the purity of the imperial palace. Huan Heng's tone was grave as he looked at Yarou Sulwan with extreme coldness. In just a few sentences, he had pointed the spearhead at Yarou Sulwan. In Yi Hongyi's embrace, Yarou Moan saw all of this. At this moment, if Yarou Zhenting was willing to say a few words for Yarou Sulwan, he would definitely be able to reverse the current unfavorable situation. However, Yarou Zhenting maintained his silence at the side, as if he didn't have any intention of sticking up for his daughter. Yarou Moan had long since anticipated this outcome. Even if his own flesh and blood were fighting for their lives in the teeth of the storm, he could still calmly protect himself. General Huan, everything needs evidence. Under the irrefutable evidence, you actually rashly tried to frame Ben Gong and exonerate Consort Chen. You've truly disappointed Your Majesty and Ben Gong. Yarou Sulwan endured the pain in her lower abdomen as she scolded angrily. As she looked at her father who was quietly watching from the side and His Majesty who was hugging Yarou Moan, Yarou Sulwan suddenly felt like she was fighting alone. However, the arrow had already been shot and there was no turning back. This subject is only speaking the truth. Your Majesty, this subject believes that the truth is far from as simple as it seems. There must be some clues. Huan Heng cupped his hands and deliberately raised his voice. Oh! What does General Huan think? Huan Heng's calmness was far outside of Yi Hongyi's expectations and caught him off guard. Yarou Moan, who was in his embrace, had a hint of admiration flash through her bright eyes. As expected of the leader of the generals, he was able to bring Yi Hongyi into the circle with just a few simple words. This subject boldly pleads Your Majesty to allow this subject to search the Imperial Gui Fei's resting palace. If Imperial Gui Fei ate saffron to frame Consort Chen, the stolen goods definitely wouldn't have been taken care of in such a short time. Huan Heng's brows rose as he spoke. As he spoke, his gaze swept over his own daughter, full of love. At the side, from the moment Huan Heng stepped into Pure Flower's palace, Huan Kia had been standing there quietly. Yarou Moan knew that this kind of reliance was based on trust. As a father, she glanced at the person next to her. Yarou Moan didn't dare to imagine. If she had wholeheartedly relied on Yarou Zhenting, she probably would have died 1,000 times over. How dare you? Do you think you can search this emperor's sleeping quarters just because you want to? Could it be that General Huan is looking down on His Majesty and this consort just because he has so many troops? Yarou Sulwan deliberately raised her voice to remind Yi Hongyi. General Huan, we hope that you understand one thing. Before we have chosen an empress, the imperial noble consort is the ruler of the inner palace. This pure flowers palace isn't a place where you can do whatever you want. Yi Hongyi seemed to realize that he had been silent for too long and looked towards Huan Heng coldly. Your Majesty, this subject is willing to use the commander's seal in my hand as a guarantee. If this subject does not find saffron in the imperial noble consort's bedroom, this subject will return the commander's seal to your Majesty and take my wife and daughter with me to disarm and return to the countryside. Huan Heng's words were exactly what Yi Hongyi wanted. Yi Hongyi practically didn't even think about it before agreeing to Huan Heng's request. His intentions were clear. Yarou Sulwan felt much more at ease when she heard this. She knew her sleeping quarters the best. There would never be any saffron. Imperial noble consort, then this subject will offend you. When Huan Heng saw Yi Hongyi nod, he began to search all around. Even though he had received the news, Huan Heng didn't head straight for the soft couch. At the very least, he should put on an act. In reality, Huan Heng's heart was already in his throat. He had heard this news from that idiot Yarou Moen, so it was hard to tell whether it was true or false. However, now that things had come to this, he had no way out. Moreover, he was very clear that this matter was directed at him. His Majesty was suspicious of him. After about the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, Huan Heng slowly walked to the front of the couch and bowed with cupped hands. This subject has been rude. As Huan Heng spoke, he crawled under the bed. When Yarou Sulwan saw that Huan Heng seemed to have a card up his sleeve, she couldn't help but raise her eyes to look towards Yi Hongyi, who was sitting at the side of the bed. She saw that Yi Hongyi's gaze was locked onto Yarou Moen, full of tenderness. Right at this time, a creaking sound suddenly came from under the bed. When Huan Heng came out from under the bed, he was holding a blood-colored saffron in his hands. Imperial noble consort, there's nothing you can say now, right? Huan Heng's brows were tightly furrowed as he glared fiercely at Yarou Sulwan. How could this be? This isn't Ben Gong's. Ben Gong's sleeping quarters don't have saffron. You're the one framing Ben Gong. Your Majesty. When Yarou Sulwan saw the saffron in Huan Heng's hands, her eyes widened and filled with panic. General Huan, where did you find this saffron? A layer of frost instantly appeared on Yi Hongyi's handsome face. His voice was as gloomy as an abyss as his eyes slowly glanced towards Yarou Sulwan. She really deserved to die. In Yi Hongyi's embrace, Yarou Moen coldly watched this good show. When she felt the heartbeat of the man beside her quicken, Yarou Moen couldn't help but sigh with emotion. A pair of idiots. There were so many ways to deal with Huan Heng, but they just had to choose the stupidest one. Even if she didn't make a move, Huan Heng would naturally have a way to find a scapegoat. Replying, Your Majesty, this subject found it in the secret compartment under the imperial noble consort's bed. Huan Heng's expression was grave and full of confidence. Yi Hongyi glanced towards Imperial Physician Zheng, who was at the side. Imperial Physician Jing understood tacitly and took the saffron into his hands. No, Your Majesty, this subject consort doesn't have a secret compartment under the bed. At this moment, Yarou Sulwan no longer cared about her noble status and threw herself under the bed. What was cruel was that she really did find a secret compartment the size of a palm under her bed. Furthermore, there was still some saffron powder left inside. Niang Niang. Your health is important, quickly get up. Cai Ying didn't expect the situation to take such a turn and didn't know what to do. She could only bend down and pull Yarou Sulwan out. When Yarou Moen saw that Cai Ying's face was as pale as paper when she got up, Yarou Sulwan knew that Yarou Sulwan was asking to be the scapegoat. To be able to react like this in such a short amount of time, Yarou Sulwan wasn't stupid. That's fine. She really didn't want Yarou Sulwan to collapse like this. She still hadn't played enough. How is it? Yi Hongyi's chest rose and fell slightly. His thin lips were tightly pursed as he coldly spat out a few words. Your Majesty, this subject consort has been wrongly accused. This saffron was definitely prepared by Huan Heng a long time ago to frame Ben Gong. Yarrow Sulwan roared in grief. If she didn't struggle to the last step, she couldn't bear to abandon this chess piece, Cai Ying. In the end, Cai Ying was still her personal maid that had followed her for 7 years. Whether or not it was prepared by Huan Heng, I believe that the imperial physicians will naturally verify it. Huan Heng sighed inwardly and turned to look towards imperial physician Zheng. Reporting to your majesty, the saffron in the palace's imperial hospital is meticulously ground by the imperial physicians in the hospital. It's definitely impossible to buy it outside the palace. This subject has checked and found that these saffrons all came from the imperial hospital, said imperial physician Zhang truthfully. Just as imperial physician Zheng finished speaking, a pa sound was heard. 5 finger marks shockingly appeared on Cai Ying's face and blood seeped out of the corner of her lips. You lowly servant, Ben Gong has treated you well, why did you have to frame Ben Gong? Yarrow Sulwan hardened her heart and pushed Cai Ying to the ground. Niang Niang, spare me, this servant knows her wrongs. Cai Ying's tears fell like rain, her frail body trembling. Yarrow Moen inwardly took a breath and felt a bit sorry for Cai Ying. However, there was a good saying, a pitiful person would definitely have a hateful side. With Cai Ying's position in Yarrow Sulwan's heart, she would definitely have participated in those heartless things. Since this matter has nothing to do with this subject concubine will take her leave. Huan Kia, who hadn't spoken for a long time, lifted her brows as she looked at Yarrow Sulwan, then turned and bowed towards Yi Hongyi. Jin will definitely give Consort Chen an explanation for this matter. Yi Hongyi's voice was low and didn't carry a trace of warmth. His body emitted dense killing intent. Yarrow Moen seemed to be familiar with this killing intent. After Huan Kia left, Huan Heng also bowed and left Pure Flower's palace. Your Majesty. Wan is scared. Yarrow Moen circled her body in Yi Hongyi's embrace, her eyes timidly looking in Yarrow Sulwan's direction. Jin will send you back to the palace. Yi Hongyi didn't even look at Yarrow Sulwan. He got up and pulled Yarrow Moen away indifferently. Yarrow Zhanting, who had been standing at the side for a long time, only shook his head and also silently left. All of Pure Flower's palace instantly became quiet. Chapter 85. Yin Shui. Yarrow Moen let out a long sigh before calling out to Yin Shui. Master's orders. There were many times when Yarrow Moen wanted to ask Yin Shui where she was hiding. She had paid attention many times but never found it. Inform Ben Lei to find an unfamiliar face and have him approach Huan Heng with the identity of a Shu secret envoy. Also, have him send people to secretly monitor the general's residence. Don't let the real Shu secret envoy sneak in. Chu Morbei, that person, heh. She hadn't gained any advantage during the confrontation, but she hadn't lost out either. This subordinate will do it right away. Yin Shui received the order and left with a whoosh. Fluffy, who was in Yarrow Moen's arms, didn't react at all. You're getting lazier and lazier. Yarrow Moen caressed Fluffy and tugged on her ear dotingly. Meow tilde Fluffy also gave her face and meowed before going back to her dreams. At this time, lunch was ready. Ting Yu slowly walked to Yarrow Moen's side and carried Fluffy to the chaise lounge. Then she helped Yarrow Moen to the square table. Has the esteemed prince's portion been delivered? Ever since Yarrow Moen forbade him to appear in front of her in white, Yi Junqing really did have 2 days to live. Replying Niang Niang, it has been delivered, replied Ting Yu. Understood, you can leave. Yarrow Moen sometimes thought back to Yang Nansheng's words. Was she really going too far? Niang Niang. Ting Yu was just about to turn to leave when she saw Yi Junqing standing at the palace gates. He was dressed in azure robes. In that instant, Yarrow Moen felt like the Yi Junqing of the past had returned. His azure robes shone with a dazzling radiance under the sunlight, accentuating Yi Junqing's tall and sturdy figure. This was the color that brought out Yi Junqing's elegance and pride the most. At this moment, Yi Junqing's handsome face seemed to be bursting with vigor and the dejection had completely disappeared. Ting Yu moved her gaze away from Yi Junqing with great difficulty. Her intuition told her that she couldn't have any improper thoughts about this man other than looking up to him. Once Ting Yu left, Yarrow Moen withdrew her gaze and walked to the table without saying a word. Ahem, there's something I want to ask you, but you can't be angry. Although Yi Junqing felt a bit embarrassed that his sincerity had been ignored, he still walked over to Yarrow Moen and sat down next to her. Tell me about it. Yarrow Moen picked up her chopsticks. Her expression was leisurely and her voice was pleasant to the ear. Seeing that Yarrow Moen was being so easy to talk to, Yi Junqing guessed that she was definitely in a good mood today, so he calmed down a little. About the imperial noble consort. You did it, right? Yi Junqing tried to look towards Yarrow Moen, but she suddenly put down her chopsticks. Her long eyelashes lifted slightly as she looked towards him with sparkling eyes. Your heart aches. Yarrow Moen lifted her brows, the light in her eyes indistinguishable. Nonsense, but I don't think it should be you. She's your older sister and the three of you have such a good relationship, you wouldn't harm her. Yi Junqing repeated the words he used to convince himself. I wasn't the one who put the saffron there. Yarrow Moen picked up her chopsticks again and said indifferently. That's right, she had once thought that they had a good relationship, but Yarrow Sulwan had taught her what wishful thinking was. When Yarrow Moen saw that Yi Junqing couldn't help but let out a light sigh of relief, she added another sentence. But, I was the one who had Yin Shui put it there. Yarrow Moen stopped talking. Yi Junqing abruptly stood up and looked towards Yarrow Moen angrily. Why did you want to harm the imperial noble consort? She's your older sister. Yi Junqing could find 1,000 reasons to explain why Yarrow Moen had instigated discord between Yi Hongyi and Huan Heng, but he couldn't find any reason to explain why she wanted to harm Yarrow Sulwan. Morshine had once said that she cared a lot about this younger sister, Sulwan. You're still saying that you don't care for her. Yarrow Moen picked up a piece of fish and tasted it carefully as if nothing had happened. Yarrow Moen, this prince is asking you a question. Yi Junqing couldn't stand Yarrow Moen's indifferent attitude the most and shouted harshly. Yin Shui, you're so noisy. Yarrow Moen's brows furrowed slightly, her voice slightly irritated. Prince, this way please. Yin Shui landed in front of Yi Junqing like a ghost. That beautiful face was completely expressionless, as if it had been sealed in ice. Yarrow Moen, this prince won't allow you to harm Morshine's younger sister. This prince will go to his majesty and expose you right now. You evil woman. Yi Junqing had fought with Yin Shui before, so he knew very well that he wasn't Yin Shui's match. Rather than being thrown out, it was better for him to walk out himself. That way, he would be able to save some face. Yin Shui, withdraw. Yarrow Moen's voice suddenly turned cold as she abruptly raised her chopsticks. Once Yin Shui disappeared, Yarrow Moen slowly got up and walked towards Yi Junqing expressionlessly. You! What are you doing? Yi Junqing swallowed hard. He had never seen Yarrow Moen with such a serious expression before. Go. Go tell His Majesty that the saffron under Yarrow Sulwan's bed was planted by this consort. Moen doesn't dare to guarantee it for other people, but if you expose me, Moen definitely won't refute. Go. Yarrow Moen's clear voice was filled with unconcealable grief and indignation. Yarrow Moen's clear eyes surged with anger and the light that shot out of them was like a sharp sword that pierced Yi Junqing's heart, causing him to feel an indescribable pain. You! Don't force me! Yarrow Moen walked forward step by step, causing Yi Junqing to retreat more and more guiltily. Even when Yi Junqing was forced into a corner, Yarrow Moen still didn't show any signs of stopping. The two's posture made one's imagination run wild. This prince didn't say that I had to go. For some reason, although Yi Junqing had always believed that he could look down on the world on the battlefield and that he had never felt fear, in front of Yarrow Moen, he always felt like he was dwarfed. Perhaps even he himself hadn't noticed the pampering that emanated from the depths of his heart. You have to go. Moen also wants to see just how carefree your expression will be when you betray Moen. Yarrow Moen's clear voice was filled with undisguised resentment. Yarrow Moen's eyes were like ripples that caused Yi Junqing's heart to sink slightly. It was as if there was something stuck in his chest, making it indescribably uncomfortable. I just wanted to remind you. In the end, Yarrow Sulwan is you, There's no need for Prince to remind you what kind of thing she is. Prince wouldn't be unable to find the imperial study, right? If you can't find it, Moen can bring you there. Yarrow Moen was so close to Yi Junqing that Yi Junqing could count how many eyelashes she had. The breath that escaped Yarrow Moen's cherry lips brushed against his face. Yi Junqing swallowed hard and suppressed the urge to go berserk with difficulty. Cough cough. This prince can give you a chance. Yi Junqing cleared his throat. Just as he was about to take a step back, he realized that he was already pressed against the wall. Thus, Yi Junqing shifted his body slightly to ease his current ambiguous posture. How about Prince follow Moen to see His Majesty right now and reveal everything about Moen? As Yarrow Moen spoke, she glanced back at Fluffy, who was sleeping in a complete mess on the chaise lounge. When she turned around, there was a trace of teasing in her eyes. How about Prince carry Fluffy in Guan Osprey Palace and have a good rest to clear your mind? Prince can choose. You're going too far. When Yi Junqing heard this, his eyes widened in anger. Moen has always been very reasonable. It seems that Prince has already made his choice. Let's go. Yarrow Moen moved her cold gaze away from Yi Junqing and turned to walk towards the palace doors. At the palace doors, when Yarrow Moen turned around, Yi Junqing was still standing there angrily. After a moment, he walked over to the chaise lounge and unwillingly picked up Fluffy to sit down. Then he glared at Yarrow Moen. The scene in front of him was so warm. A man as gentle as jade, like an immortal, was holding a kitten with snow-colored fur. Man and nature were infinitely harmonious. Chapter 86. This prince has already done as you said. What else do you want to do? Asked Yi Junqing nervously when he saw that Yarrow Moen had left. Fluffy is a pregnant kitten. Prince, don't disturb the kitten in her stomach. Yarrow Moen pressed her thumb to her lips as she carefully glanced at Fluffy. After giving a few instructions, she turned to leave. Hey! Yi Junqing wanted to say something else, but Yarrow Moen had already disappeared from his line of sight. Yi Junqing laughed helplessly as he looked at the empty doorway. His worries were completely unnecessary. Yarrow Moen wasn't an idiot. Why would she confess everything to Yi Hongyi? Yi Junqing could tell that whoever dared to treat Yarrow Moen as an idiot was definitely the #1 idiot in the world. And they would definitely die miserably. Fluffy, how can you stand a master like this? Yi Junqing reflexively stroked Fluffy's fur. Meow tilde Fluffy seemed to understand Yi Junqing's words and meowed very gently. Yi Junqing was startled at first, but then his lips slowly curved into a faint smile. Perhaps, he didn't really hate this cat that much. In the Imperial Garden, Tingyu noticed that Yarrow Moen's expression was dark. She asked carefully, Your Highness, where are we going? To amuse that person in Pure Flower's palace. If it weren't for Yi Junqing's pleas, she might have let Yarrow Sulwan have a few days of peace. Consort Li. But Consort Li is currently in a fit of anger. Your Highness, why don't you go in 2 days? Reminded Tingyu kindly. Given Yarrow Sulwan's current mood, she was afraid that her master would suffer a loss. Does this consort need to pick a day to amuse her? Say this later. Yarrow Moen stopped and muttered a few words in Tingyu's ears, then turned and walked towards Pure Flower's palace. Inside Pure Flower's palace, Yarrow Sulwan tightly gripped the teacup in her hands. The sound of the lid hitting against the cup grew louder and louder. Suddenly, there was a bang as Yarrow Sulwan threw the teacup onto the ground. How did you make tea? Do you want to burn this consort to death? Yarrow Sulwan looked malevolently towards the new palace maid, Mingyu, a trace of disgust flashing through her eyes. Even if Mingyu had a pleasant appearance and was the daughter of a humble family, in Yarrow Sulwan's eyes, she wasn't as good as Cai Ying. Your Highness, please forgive me. Mingyu will make another cup. Even if the crime of poisoning the dragon species fell on Cai Ying's head, the eyes of the people in the imperial palace were all bright. They knew that Cai Ying was taking the blame for Zhen. Thus, as one of the few palace maids and Bingshan trusted, Mingyu naturally knew that what she had to do now was to submit to adversity. As Mingyu spoke, she nimbly picked up the broken pieces of porcelain on the ground. She had just stood up when she heard the sound of footsteps coming from the palace gate. "Zishuang, do you smell anything in this Pure Flowers palace?" A clear voice suddenly rang out. Before the palace maid could report, Huan Kia had already swaggered in with Zishuang. "Replying to your highness, there's a moldy, unlucky smell. It's very unpleasant." Zishuang waved her hand in the air and echoed. Seeing Huan Kia walk into the main hall, Mingyu immediately put the porcelain pieces in her hands into her sleeves and bowed. This servant Mingyu kowtows in salute to Imperial Consort Chen. "Imperial Consort Li, you've got guts. You're actually not coming forward to salute my master? Don't forget, you're a consort right now and my master is an imperial consort." "What? Do you still think you're an imperial consort?" When Zishuang saw Yarosulwan sitting there without any warmth in her expression, she took a step forward and berated her harshly. Her attitude was extremely vile. Yarosulwan was speechless. Suppressing the resentment in her heart, she slowly got up and walked in front of Huan Kia with difficulty. Just as she was about to salute, she heard a slap. Huan Kia's hand rose and fell. A 5-fingered mark appeared on Yarosulwan's face. Before Yarosulwan could react, Huan Kia raised her hand again. "Your Highness, be careful." At the side, Mingyu immediately stepped forward to block in front of Yarosulwan and took Huan Kia's slap. "Huan Kia, you've gone too far." Yarosulwan's eyes widened and she glared angrily at Huan Kia. "No matter how much this consort has gone too far, it's not even 1/10,000th of what you did. Even a vicious tiger won't eat its cubs. You, Yarosulwan, are truly worse than an animal. In order to frame this consort, you actually killed your own child with your own hands. This consort has truly underestimated you. How ruthless. If it wasn't for father's foresight and finding the saffron in your bedroom, this consort would have been banished to the cold palace or even lost my life. I've only slapped you once, and you've already taken advantage of me." Huan Kia's beautiful eyes flickered with a cold, vicious aura. "You're slandering me. How could this consort poison her own child? That was Cai Ying's fault. She has already pleaded guilty." Yarosulwan retorted guiltily. Her jade-like fingers rubbed her aching cheek. The hatred in her heart was like a flood bursting through a dam. She had once explained to Yi Hongyi countless times that there had never been a secret compartment under her bed and that someone had definitely framed her. However, Yi Hongyi didn't listen to a single word and indiscriminately demoted her by 2 ranks. If it wasn't for him, Yi Hongyi's great Chu, she wouldn't be like this. "Yarosulwan, there are no outsiders here, so why do you have to put on such an act? Ben Gong truly feels pity for Cai Ying, that girl. She served you for a lifetime, yet in the end, all she got in return was a cup of poisoned wine. Yarosulwan, this matter is over with His Majesty, but this matter isn't over with this consort. Zishuang, smash it for this consort." Huan Kia's cold gaze was like frost. When father had laid out the powerful connections in front of her, Huan Kia couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. According to father, this matter was definitely a conspiracy between His Majesty and Yarosulwan. Their goal was to eradicate the Huan residents. Fortunately, the crisis had been resolved in the end. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been the only one to die. It was lonely at the top. This was also the reason why father had told her to reject the position of empress. Once Zishuang received the order, she immediately rushed to the antique wooden shelf at the side and casually tossed the jade Buddha and white jade guanyin on it onto the ground. "Stop." Yarosulwan was so angry that she was about to rush forward to stop Zishuang when Huan Kia grabbed her wrist. Her strength was so great that Yarosulwan couldn't struggle at all. "Smash it hard for this consort." Huan Kia glanced at Yarosulwan as she said coldly. "Imperial Consort Chen, my master is naturally 1 rank lower than you, but don't forget, my master's younger sister has been bestowed the title of Imperial Consort with the surname Imperial Consort and is extremely favored by His Majesty. My Imperial Consort has a deep friendship with Consort Yarrow. How did you bully my master? I believe that Consort Yarrow will repay you with interest." At the side, Mingyu respectfully walked in front of Huan Kia, neither servile nor overbearing. When Huan Kia heard this, her heart went cold. She hadn't forgotten how she had fallen into Jade Lake, nor had she forgotten how His Majesty had doted on Yarrow Sulwan. Zi Shuang, this consort is tired. This consort will stop here for today. Whenever this consort is in a bad mood, you can come over to vent your anger and help this consort back. Huan Kia absent-mindedly shook off Yarrow Sulwan and extended a jade finger towards Zi Shuang as she walked out of Pure Flower's palace. When Yarrow Moen saw Huan Kia leave Pure Flower's palace, she walked out lazily from behind the banyan tree. Niang, based on Imperial Consort Chen's temper, I believe that Imperial Consort Li must have suffered quite a bit, said Tingyu excitedly. Chapter 87. Second older sister, Moen has come to see you. Looking at the mess on the ground, Yarrow Moen's lips curved imperceptibly. This servant kowtows in salute to Consort Yarrow. Consort Yarrow, Your Highness, good luck. Ming Yu, who was cleaning up the broken pieces, immediately walked forward and saluted respectfully. You're the new palace maid, right? I've never seen you before. Yarrow Moen blinked as she looked at Ming Yu, who was bowing down in front of her. She had delicate features, dignified and polite. To not be defiled by an Bingshan and even be treated as a trusted aide, this palace maid definitely had an extremely meticulous mind. Yarrow Moen remembered this person and believed that she would be useful in the future. Replying Consort Yarrow, this servant has just been transferred into Pure Flower's palace, replied Mingyu humbly, not daring to raise her eyes. Mingyu, there's nothing else for you here. Leave. If it was Cai Ying, she definitely wouldn't be so respectful to this idiot. Seeing Mingyu bow and scrape to an idiot, Yarrow Sulwan really missed Cai Ying more and more. After Mingyu left, Yarrow Sulwan glanced coldly at Yarrow Moen. Even if her rank was lower than Yarrow Moen's, she couldn't change her habits. Fortunately, Yarrow Moen didn't care about this. What did you come for? If Yarrow Moen wasn't an idiot, Yarrow Sulwan would definitely think that she came to watch a show. At this time, Yarrow Sulwan slowly sat down at the table and looked indifferently towards Yarrow Moen. Her looks weren't bad, but she was an idiot. Yarrow Sulwan really didn't understand why His Majesty was so mesmerized by her. This world was becoming more and more strange. Moen came to see second older sister. The little baby and Cai Ying both went to a very far place. Second older sister must be very lonely. Yarrow Moen gracefully walked to sit in front of Yarrow Sulwan. Yarrow Sulwan silently picked up her teacup and didn't even look Yarrow Moen in the eye. Actually, second older sister doesn't need to worry. Wan knows someone who can find them, just like how they found Wan's mother. Yarrow Moen looked towards Yarrow Sulwan mysteriously. Her watery eyes were so innocent and harmless. Yarrow Sulwan trembled slightly when she heard this. Then she looked towards Yarrow Moen, a layer of mist flashing through her eyes. Niang, don't speak irresponsibly. At the side, Tingyu immediately walked to Yarrow Moen's side and lightly pushed her. Who's spouting nonsense? Daoist priest by my did find Wan's mother. Yarrow Moen looked towards Tingyu angrily and said seriously. You. Who are you talking about? Yarrow Sulwan felt her heart suddenly stop, her eyes as cold as ice. Niang, you promised this servant not to tell anyone. Tingyu looked towards Yarrow Moen anxiously as her expression changed. But second older sister isn't just anyone. Yarrow Moen retorted. Tingyu, shut up. Yarrow Mo Wan, did you just say by my? Do you know Daoist priest by my? A cloud of suspicion rose in Yarrow Sulwan's heart. That by my is an otherworldly person Cai Ying invited. How could Yarrow Mo Wan know him? That's right, Wan naturally recognizes Daoist priest by my. He even helped Wan find mother. Yarrow Moen made a solemn vow and nodded firmly. How is this possible? Yarrow Sulwan kept having a bad feeling lingering in her chest, making her feel indescribably irritated and uneasy, even a bit panicked. How is it impossible? I saw it with my own eyes. Mother's soul turned into a pile of ashes and rushed into Fluffy's stomach. Daoist priest by my told Wan that mother reincarnated into Fluffy's stomach. In another month, Wan can see mother. So happy. Second older sister, How about I invite Daoist priest by my over one day and have him send the little baby and Cai Ying's soul to reincarnate as well? It would be best if they were also reincarnated into Fluffy's stomach. The imperial doctor said that Fluffy is pregnant with quite a few kittens. Yarrow Moen made up a deluge of heavenly flowers, feeling slightly sorry for her mother. Daoist priest by my, a pile of ashes. Yarrow Sulwan's face was filled with fear as the scene in the side room flashed before her eyes. At the side, Tingyu hurriedly walked to Yarrow Sulwan's side. Consort Li, don't listen to my Niang's nonsense. That by my is a famous swindler in Jianghu. This servant only found him to make master happy so that you won't be thinking about second madam every day. As for those tricks to deceive people, it's just a smokescreen. Niang should just listen to what master says and don't take it to heart, said Tingyu carefully before retreating to Yarrow Moen's side. If he's a swindler, then, that's impossible. He can't be a swindler. Yarrow Sulwan abruptly stood up. Her cold eyes were like a jackal's as she glared at Tingyu. Second older sister, no one said he's a swindler, right? Yarrow Moen looked towards Tingyu innocently. Yes, Daoist priest by my wouldn't lie. Niang, Fluffy should be awake by now. This servant will help you back. Sensing Yarrow Sulwan's anger from killing people and whipping corpses, Tingyu subconsciously walked to Yarrow Moen's side to seek protection. That's right, we can't let Fluffy go hungry. Otherwise, mother will suffer. Second older sister, Moen is leaving. I'll come see you in 2 days. Oh right, if second older sister has decided where to let the little baby and Cai Ying be reincarnated, you can have Tingyu find Daoist priest by my. He's very impressive. Yarrow Moen didn't forget to provoke Yarrow Sulwan before leaving. Niang, let's go. Fluffy can't wait any longer. When Tingyu sensed that the surrounding air had dropped to a freezing point, she hurriedly pulled Yarrow Moen out of Pure Flower's palace. The second Yarrow Moen stepped out of Pure Flower's palace, a mournful howl came from inside. Niang. Tingyu reflexively looked towards Yarrow Moen. She saw that Yarrow Moen's beautiful eyes were as clear as water and her lips were curved into a faint smile. Yarrow Sulwan, this is just the beginning, you must hold on. Yarrow Moen suddenly felt that the air was very fresh, so she took a deep breath and walked back to Guan Osprey Palace with large strides. Inside Pure Flower's palace, Yarrow Sulwan pushed the square table to the ground as if she'd gone mad. Her scarlet eyes that looked like they were about to split apart shot out raging flames as if she wanted to burn everything here. Why? Heavens, why must you treat Ben Gong like this? Cai Ying, your death isn't worth pitying. You deserve to die. You actually found that swindler to trick Ben Gong, child. Mother has let you down. I've let you down. Yarrow Sulwan felt as if her heart was being roasted by a raging fire. The pain was indescribable. What reincarnation? That was all a lie. She'd actually personally caused the death of her own flesh and blood. This cruel reality completely crushed Yarrow Sulwan. When Ming Yu returned to Pure Flower's palace, the ground was a mess and Yarrow Sulwan was lying in the corner like a corpse. Her eyes were empty and her face was covered in tears. Before entering Pure Flower's palace, Yarrow Moen saw Yi Junqing hugging Fluffy as he slept on the chaise longue. His tranquil face was as clear as a sculpture and his perfect features were flawless. Even though he was expressionless, that kind of natural beauty still made one sigh in admiration. Especially with the contrast of Fluffy's snow-white fur, Yi Junqing seemed like an immortal, his beauty ethereal and illusory. Niang. Right at this time, Liu Xing ran over from the distance. Yarrow Moen raised a finger to shush him, then brought him to the stone steps outside Guan Osprey Palace. What is it? Yarrow Moen casually sat on the swing and slowly swung on her golden embroidered shoes. A light breeze brushed past, causing her light pink skirt to sway and her long hair to draw a graceful arc. As the wind blew, she looked like an immortal. Replying Niang, this servant found out that Third Madam has a close relationship with Zhuangji Pharmacy's physician, Zhu Chengwu. Before Third Madam entered Yarrow Xiongfu, they were childhood sweethearts. Later on, after Master married Third Madam, he placed her in the Su Fu. That Zhu Chengwu has always been in charge of Third Madam's pregnancy. But Liu Xing wanted to say something but hesitated. Chapter 88. What this consort wants is conclusive evidence. Yarrow Moen's feet touched the ground as a gentle light flickered in her deep eyes. She was just thinking, how could a sanctimonious hypocrite like Yarrow Zhenting have a son? Liu Xing understands. Once Liu Xing withdrew, Yarrow Moen waved to dismiss Ting Yu and deliberately walked quietly into Guan Osprey Palace. Yi Junqing was sleeping so soundly that he didn't even notice Yarrow Moen standing in front of him. Yarrow Moen's lips curved into a knowing smile as she looked at that bright and beautiful face. Junqing, for the sake of Great Chu, you've cut your way through brambles and thorns, fought bloody battles, fearlessly slept in the open, fearless of blades and shadows. You've built Great Chu's impenetrable walls for me, but I've caused you to fall into such a miserable and dispirited state. Sleep well. Once you truly wake up, Moen will definitely return Great Chu to you and make up for your lifetime of love. Tears trickled down from the corners of her eyes. Yarrow Moen silently wiped them away and slowly walked towards Yi Junqing. She couldn't help but caress him with her slender fingers. Just as Yarrow Moen's fingers were about to touch Yi Junqing's face, he suddenly opened his eyes. When his limpid eyes saw the fingertips that were just inches away from him, all drowsiness disappeared. His eyes locked onto the owner of those fingers. What are you doing? Yi Junqing looked towards Yarrow Moen with a guarded expression. I only left for a while and you're already thinking like this. My Fluffy is truly pitiful. This is clearly her own territory, but most of it has been taken over by someone who doesn't even know it. You must have slept very uncomfortably, right? Yarrow Moen's fingers changed direction and she picked up Fluffy as if nothing had happened. She didn't even look at Yi Junqing as she walked into the inner room. On the chaise lounge, Yi Junqing's expression darkened. He really wanted to shout back. Did I want to? Did I feel very comfortable? However, before he could confirm whether or not Yarrow Moen was still angry about what had just happened, he chose to remain silent. However, he could still curse inwardly. Ever since Yarrow Sulwan was demoted, the limelight had been monopolized by a fool in the inner palace. This kind of situation had changed the opinions of many people. Originally, everyone thought that because His Majesty had an older sister who was an imperial Gui Fei, His Majesty loved the house and its crow, which was why he would grant a fool the title of Fei. But now, everyone finally understood that His Majesty truly doted on Yarrow Moen. Because of Yarrow Sulwan's matter, His Majesty has distanced himself from Yarrow Zhenting in court. Only Yarrow Moen's favor has increased. Inside the Soul Sand Garden, Yi Hongyi held Yarrow Moen's hand as he stared at the luxuriant flowers of the Soul Sand tree in front of him. His heart was filled with disappointment and frustration. Even if he didn't like Yarrow Morshin, he had to admit that Yarrow Morshin was probably the most intelligent woman he'd ever met. To be able to use this kind of method to look at the stars was truly not something an ordinary person could do. Wanna looked at the stars last night. The crepe myrtle star shone brightly while the general star in the White Tiger constellation was dim. Your Majesty, this Soul Sand Garden is really amazing. Yarrow Mo Wn pointed at the Soul Sand tree in the White Tiger constellation and exclaimed in surprise. Let's go, Jun will accompany you to see Fluffy. The imperial physician said that she's been suffering from anorexia recently. Yi Hongyi tightly held Yarrow Moen's hand as he turned to leave Soul Sand Garden. Ever since the day Yarrow Sulwan miscarried, Huanheng had been tactful and used his old age as an excuse to hand over half of his military power. This could be considered to have resolved a great worry for Yi Hongyi. Especially after he saw that the Soul Sand tree that represented him was growing more and more luxuriant, Yi Hongyi's heart finally calmed down. In the shadows, Yarrow Sulwan watched as Yi Hongyi held Yarrow Moen's hand and walked further and further away. The expression on her face was extremely sinister and the brocade handkerchief in her hands was wrinkled beyond recognition. She hated Yi Hongyi for killing the donkey when it was no longer of use and cooking the dog when the rabbit was dead. She hated that idiot Yarrow Moen even more for seizing the Emperor's favor. Right now, in His Majesty's eyes, even that damned animal was more precious than herself. Her pitiful child had died for no reason at all. How could she not hate? Niang Niang, this is the rat poison you wanted. Ming Yu carefully handed over the paper bag containing the rat poison to Yarrow Sulwan. Go stand guard outside Guan Osprey Palace right now. The moment you see that animal, you must do everything in your power to bring it to Pure Flowers Palace, said Yarrow Sulwan through clenched teeth. Then she grabbed the rat poison and left Soul Sand Garden. Only when Yarrow Sulwan was far away did Ming Yu retreat to a corner. Unicorn, in your opinion, should this servant bring Yarrow Fei's Fluffy to Pure Flowers Palace? Asked Ming Yu respectfully as she stood next to Bingshan. Zijia really doesn't understand. To be able to get to the position of Imperial Gui Fei, Yarrow Sulwan shouldn't be an idiot. Why is it that when she's doing things, she seems even more of an idiot than Yarrow Fei? Since she hates Yarrow Fei, why didn't she just feed the rat poison to Yarrow Fei? That would save Zijia a lot of trouble. Forget it, it looks like I'll have to trouble you to stay by Yarrow Sulwan's side until I get hold of her fatal weakness. And Bingshan narrowed his small eyes, his sharp gaze shooting in the direction Yarrow Sulwan had left in. It's this servant's fortune to be able to serve Unicorn. This servant won't feel wronged. Ming Yu lowered her head humbly, her spirited eyes shining with an unwavering light. You really are sensible, unlike Hong Mai. Forget it. Don't worry, if you work for Zijia, you won't be lacking in benefits. Go. And Bingshan cleared his throat, then waved his horsetail whisk to dismiss Ming Yu. Perhaps it was because Yi Junqing had taken the initiative to express goodwill that day, but these past 2 days, Fluffy had become a frequent visitor to the east wing of Guan Osprey Palace. No matter how unwilling Yi Junqing was, he didn't dare to use violence to chase her away. In Yarrow Moen's words, if he startled the kitten in Fluffy's stomach, he couldn't guarantee that Yarrow Moen wouldn't eat him alive. Meow tilde at noon, Fluffy lazily rubbed against Yi Junqing's ankle as she meowed non-stop. Only when Yi Junqing couldn't bear it any longer did he put down the brush in his hand and bend over to pull Fluffy into his embrace. Fluffy, you're becoming more and more like your master. You know how to do everything besides being reasonable. Yi Junqing glared at Fluffy, who was obediently lying in his embrace and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Inside Guan Osprey Palace, when Yi Junqing walked in with Fluffy in his arms, he just happened to see Yi Hongyi pressing Yarrow Moen under his body and kissing her snow-white neck without the slightest restraint. His heart suddenly felt like it had been stung by a wasp. It wasn't a big deal if it was just a little bit of pain. What was important was that there was poison in the area of pain. The poison quickly spread and that faint pain spread throughout his entire body. When Fluffy felt Yi Junqing's arms tighten around her, she let out an extremely uncomfortable meow. Then she threw herself onto the ground and secretly enjoyed herself. So it's Junqing. Look at us, we even forgot the time and almost let our Wana go hungry. It's our fault. Yi Hongyi naturally pulled up Yarrow Moen, who was pressed down on the chaise lounge. He was a bit vexed. He had clearly just obtained boundless satisfaction from Yarrow Moen last night, but just now, he still couldn't suppress his desire for this woman. Yi Hongyi had asked himself over and over again what was so good about Yarrow Moen. She even seemed to have some problems with her intelligence, but he just had to stubbornly desire this body to the point where he couldn't control it. For a moment, Yi Hongyi thought of the word love. Junqing, you're here. Where's Fluffy? Yarrow Moen innocently looked towards Yi Junqing from behind Yi Hongyi as a trace of guilt flashed through her eyes. Even though she had been reborn, even though she knew of Yi Junqing's deep feelings for her, in this lifetime, she still couldn't completely give herself to this man. Yarrow Morshin had already become a thing of the past. She believed that there would be better women worthy of Yi Junqing's protection. In her mind, besides revenge, there was also gratitude. Wana, what did you call him? When Yi Hongyi heard Yarrow Moen call him that so intimately, a dark haze suddenly welled up in his heart. Junqing, Fluffy likes it when Wana calls her that. Although Wana doesn't like it, who told Fluffy to be pregnant with a cat baby? Junqing, where's Fluffy? Yarrow Moen's shrug tickled Yi Hongyi badly. He had been thinking too much. How could his Wana possibly like another man? It wasn't for any other reason but because he treated her especially well. Our Wana always has so many strange thoughts. Junqing, don't mind her. Yi Hongyi took 2 steps forward and pulled Yarrow Moen into his embrace. His deep eyes carried a trace of strangeness as he looked towards Enchanting. The once all-powerful legend of the battlefield was probably going to be crippled if he continued to stay here. Chapter 89. Enchanting, I'm asking you a question. Where's Fluffy? Yarrow Moen reached out to tug on the corner of Enchanting's clothes, but Enchanting brushed it away. I'm truly sorry, this prince isn't looking after cats for Consort Yao. How would I know where Fluffy is? Said Enchanting resentfully. Wana doesn't care, you have to help me find Fluffy. Otherwise, don't eat, said Yarrow Moen hatefully. Then she walked over to Yi Hongyi's side without looking back. Enchanting, this must be hard on you. Zhen didn't know that the esteemed prince's 3 meals a day were guaranteed by a cat. Yi Hongyi picked up a strand of Yarrow Moen's hair and played with it. His tone was full of mockery and mockery. This subject brother will take his leave. Enchanting cupped his hands indifferently and turned to leave. Hey! Where are you going? Shouted Yarrow Moen when she saw Enchanting walk out of Guan Osprey Palace. Looking for a cat, said a clear voice. When Yarrow Moen heard this, a hint of a smile appeared in her eyes. A burst of laughter came from above. Yarrow Moen knew that Yi Hongyi's laughter had a completely different meaning than her own. As the saying goes, a flower planted intentionally won't bloom, but a willow planted unintentionally will grow into shade. Enchanting originally didn't care about Fluffy's whereabouts and just wanted to hide in the Imperial Garden. However, he didn't expect to see Mingyu hurrying towards Pure Flower's palace while carrying the drowsy Fluffy. Out of curiosity, Enchanting couldn't help but follow Mingyu to Pure Flower's palace. His figure flashed and he quickly jumped onto the roof. Niang Niang, Mingyu brought Fluffy over. I just sprayed some sleeping drug in its mouth, so it's sleeping now. As Mingyu spoke, she placed Fluffy on the table and said this cautiously. How can it be fed rat poison if it's sleeping? Go get some water to wake it up. When Yarrow Sulwan saw Fluffy's bulging belly, her heart was suddenly filled with hatred. At this moment, she wanted nothing more than to treat Fluffy like Yarrow Moen and personally skin it. Niang Niang, please reconsider. Consort Yarrow dotes on this cat. If it goes missing for no reason, Consort Yarrow definitely won't let it go. At that time, if Niang Niang is found. Mingyu displayed the loyalty a servant should have and tried her best to dissuade Yarrow Moen. I don't need your nonsense. Go get it. Yarrow Sulwan was burning with anger and her dark eyes were filled with extreme grief and indignation. Even now, Yarrow Sulwan still didn't know where she had gone wrong and why she ended up like this. How could it be like this? Since Yarrow Sulwan had brought about her own destruction by thoroughly offending the only power she could rely on, Mingyu naturally didn't need to think for her. After all, her mission was to grab hold of Yarrow Sulwan's weakness and then hand it over to Bingshan, even though her goal wasn't as simple as currying favor with Bingshan. Just as Mingyu reached the palace gates, she was suddenly stopped by Yarrow Sulwan. No need. Bring me a knife. Yarrow Sulwan's voice was frightening and her face was sinister. Unconcealable killing intent burst forth from her eyes that were as black as hell. That steaming killing intent surrounded Yarrow Sulwan. At this moment, Yarrow Sulwan was like a demon from hell, causing people to feel fear at the sight of her. Niang Niang. Mingyu's willowy brows furrowed as she looked towards Yarrow Sulwan in confusion. This consort wants to personally cut open its stomach and see what's inside. Yarrow Sulwan's slender fingers stroked Fluffy's fur like a devil's claw. Her scarlet lips curved into a cold smile. The reincarnation of that slut Mo Li? Daoist priest by my? They were all liars. She wanted to see with her own eyes whether the thing inside this beast's stomach was a human or a cat. Niang Niang, in the end, it's just a life. Mingyu couldn't bear to see Fluffy die so miserably and tried to comfort her. Are you deaf? This consort wants you to take the knife. Yarrow Sulwan looked towards Mingyu viciously. The light in her eyes was clearly that of a wild beast that had lost its humanity. When Mingyu handed the dagger over with trembling hands, Yarrow Sulwan abruptly snatched the dagger away. Her malevolent expression was twisted beyond recognition. At this moment, the sharp dagger was pressed against Fluffy's heaving stomach. Yarrow Sulwan's cold eyes emitted a dark green light. It was as if she could see Yarrow Moen lying in front of her. She could even imagine Yarrow Moen posing in all kinds of seductive positions to seduce her man. Yarrow Moen, go die. Yarrow Sulwan gripped the hilt of the knife tightly with both hands and stabbed it down. In a flash, a blue figure flashed by. In the next second, Fluffy had already landed in Yi Juanqing's arms, safe and sound. Consort Li, why are you making things difficult for a cat? Yi Juanqing couldn't imagine that the woman in front of him was the gentle, kind, and virtuous Yarrow Sulwan from back then. At least, that was what Mo Xin had once said about her. Su. Esteemed prince. Why are you here? In the end, Yarrow Sulwan was someone who had fought her way through the inner palace, so she managed to rein in her emotions. She took a deep breath and looked towards Yi Juanqing with a stunned expression. She calmly handed the sharp blade to Mingyu. If this prince wasn't here, then Consort Yarrow's cat would have become a ghost under Consort Li's knife. This prince doesn't understand why Consort Li would hate this cat so much that she would want to cut open its stomach while it was still alive. Yi Juanqing looked towards Yarrow Sulwan coldly as countless questions arose in his heart. Since Yarrow Sulwan didn't know that Yarrow Moen had framed her, why did she hate Yarrow Moen so much? Perhaps he had misjudged Yarrow Moen for not caring about their sibling relationship earlier. What is Prince saying? This consort doesn't understand. This consort just wanted to take a good look at Fluffy. What's wrong with that? Yarrow Sulwan lifted her brows as she looked towards Yi Juanqing, the jealousy in her heart growing stronger. She really didn't understand what was so good about Yarrow Morshin that she could make such an outstanding man give up everything for her. This prince saw everything clearly just now. Does Consort Li still want to argue? A trace of disgust appeared in Yi Juanqing's eyes and his heart ached inexplicably. It really wasn't worth it for Mo Xin to treat such a malicious person as her own sibling. Prince has probably misunderstood. This consort really doesn't have any ill intentions towards Fluffy. As for what Prince saw, no one would believe it. I almost forgot. Since Prince is currently residing in Guan Osprey Palace, then I'll have to trouble Prince to send Fluffy back. This consort has seen enough. Yarrow Sulwan smiled coldly as she looked towards Yi Juanqing. Her beautiful face had now transformed into a sinister expression. Yi Juanqing finally felt relieved. He started to believe that whatever Yarrow Moen did, it was always right. This prince bids farewell. Yi Juanqing had no intention of arguing with Yarrow Sulwan. He carried the dizzy Fluffy and strode out of Pure Flower's palace. Damn it! As Yarrow Sulwan watched Yi Juanqing leave, she clenched her fists so tightly that the veins on her skin bulged. The coldness in her eyes was bone-piercing. After leaving Pure Flower's palace, Yi Juanqing still felt a lingering fear. If he had been a step late, he didn't know what would have happened to Fluffy. Furthermore, the kitten in her stomach definitely wouldn't have survived either. In the Imperial Gardens waterside pavilion, Yi Juanqing hugged Fluffy with heartache. There were subtle changes in his heart. Love the house, love the crow. There had to be a reason why he felt heartache for Fluffy, it was just that he didn't care about it right now. This subject concubine Yu Funning greets Prince. A clear and melodious voice was like the chirping of an oriole deep in the mountains. It was pleasant to the ears and lingered for 3 days. When Yi Juanqing heard this, he looked up and saw a woman dressed in gorgeous clothes standing in front of him. Behind her was a nimble palace maid. He saw that the woman in front of him had eyebrows that seemed to be shrouded in mist. Her eyelashes were as thin as silk, and her figure was slender and graceful. Her beauty was graceful but not ostentatious. Her clear eyes looked less pure and more charming. There weren't many accessories on her hair, but every one of them was precious. The luminous pearl at her waist was especially rare. Yu Funning, the eldest daughter of the Minister of Rites, Yu Qing. She had a dignified appearance and a meticulous mind. Her red phoenix eyes seemed to have the power to see through everything and constantly emitted a sharp light. In addition, because Yu Qing was skilled in accumulating wealth, Yu Funning could be considered the wealthiest of all the concubines in the inner palace. There was a saying that money could make the devil turn millstones. Not a single matter, big or small, could escape Yu Funning's eyes. Her spies were definitely no less than An Bingshan's. Consort Xian is too polite. Please rise. According to the rules of the palace, aside from the empress, all the other concubines in the inner palace had to salute when they saw Prince. Aside from Yarrow Moen, all the other concubines were still very polite, Enchanting thought. Fanning only knew that Prince's hands are used to using sabers, spears, swords, and halberds, but I didn't know that Prince would also love cats so tenderly. Fanning's calm eyes glanced towards Fluffy in Enchanting's arms. Chapter 90. Different people have different opinions. Enchanting still has to send Fluffy back. Farewell. Enchanting was surprised by the pity in Fanning's eyes. In his memories, he had only met this consort Xian a few times. There shouldn't be such a deep friendship between them. I respectfully send Prince off. Fanning folded her hands at her waist and saluted. Only after Enchanting had walked far away did she slowly walk forward to help her master up. Your Highness, there's no need to say such hurtful words. The esteemed prince is probably unhappy. She tugged at Fanning's slightly creased skirt as she spoke in a low voice. This consort can't bear for him to continue like this. Fanning looked at Enchanting's back with boundless love and tears welling up in her eyes. Your Highness, why do you have to do this? You clearly know that with your current status, even if he was willing to show even the slightest bit of concern, this consort would be willing to give up everything here and leave with him. This consort will never forget that brief moment we brushed shoulders on Chang'an Street. This consort knows that brief moment was 10,000 years. In this lifetime, this consort will never have anyone else in her heart. Unfortunately, falling flowers yearn for love, but heartless water flows mercilessly. His heart has long since been stolen by Yarrow Moen. What this consort is angry about is that since Yarrow Moen is already dead, why hasn't she returned his heart to him? Fanning's eyes were filled with tears as her voice trembled slightly. Your Highness, don't speak carelessly. The walls might have ears. She immediately pulled on Fanning tightly as she looked around. What this consort is even more angry about is that after Yarrow Moen left, another Yarrow Moen came. Fanning was clearly this agitated. She clenched her fists so tightly that they hurt. Your Highness, why bother with a fool? How could that Yarrow Moen be mentioned in the same breath as Yarrow Moen? Seeing that there was no one else around, she sighed in relief. Fool? You also think that Yarrow Moen is a fool? Don't forget, that fool is the only one in the inner palace right now. Fanning restrained the deep emotions in her eyes and her cold gaze gradually turned icy. But everyone knows that Yarrow Moen has a silly younger sister. How could it be fake? She frowned and looked towards Fanning in confusion. Everyone knows that Yarrow Moen died in childbirth. But Fanning coldly snorted, but before she could finish speaking, she stopped her. Niang. She looked around warily. Therefore, what everyone knows is not necessarily the truth. This consort is certain that not only is that Yarrow Moen not stupid, she's actually very shrewd. Right now, she's pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger and has His Majesty firmly in her mouth. Yarrow Sulwan's fall from favor actually didn't affect her at all. This fool isn't simple at all. Whenever Fanning thought about how Yarrow Moen was able to see Enchanting day and night, she felt even more resentment. Your Highness, you wouldn't become enemies with her, right? We don't have to. She said worriedly when she sensed the coldness coming from Fanning's body. Yarrow Moen truly isn't worth this consort's scheming. However, this consort can't just watch as Enchanting continues to be so dispirited. It's not worth it for a single Yarrow Moen. After saying this, Fanning strode towards the 9 winding corridors. Behind her, she knew that whenever something related to the esteemed prince came up, her master would never be able to remain calm. This was her greatest taboo. Only when Fanning's figure faded out of sight did Yarrow Moen walk out. Her eyes were incomparably pitch black like midnight. Your Highness, why does this servant feel like there's more to Consort Xian's words? It seems like there's more to eldest Mrs. Death. Ting Yu's brows were tightly furrowed as she looked towards Yarrow Moen apprehensively. Let's go back. This consort is worried about Fluffy. Yarrow Moen's expression didn't change. When she turned around, she deliberately glanced in the direction Yu Funning had left in. Regarding that matter, Yi Hongyi had already killed everyone who knew about it and burned down the cold palace, so how did Yu Funning find out? However, in Yarrow Moen's heart, this wasn't important. She had never thought about clearing her own grievances because that would be meaningless. What she wanted was an eye for an eye. As for Yu Funning's feelings for Yi Junqing, perhaps this was an opportunity. It wasn't without reason that Yu residents, along with the Wang, Xie, and Huan clans, were listed as one of the 4 great pillars of the imperial court. As the Minister of Rites, Yu Qing often used ceremonies, sacrificial ceremonies, state banquets, imperial examinations, and other foreign affairs to amass wealth. Because of this, Yu Qing had the key to the national treasury. If Yu Qing colluded with the enemy, the consequences would be hard to predict. When Ting Yu saw that her master wasn't paying attention to Yu Funning's words, she quickly cut off that thought. When Yarrow Moen returned to Guan Osprey Palace, she saw that Yi Junqing was carefully placing Fluffy on the chaise lounge. "What is Prince doing?" A clear voice rang out. When Yi Junqing heard this, he turned around to see Yarrow Moen looking at him suspiciously. "Ah, Fluffy's asleep. Keep your voice down." Yi Junqing was slightly startled. In the end, he decided not to tell Yarrow Moen what he had seen. With Yarrow Moen's vengeful personality, if she found out how Yarrow Sulwan had treated Fluffy, who knew what kind of shocking actions she would take? When did Prince treat Fluffy this well? Could it be that you've done something shameful? Yarrow Moen lifted her brows as she looked towards Yi Junqing. As she walked towards the chaise lounge, her eyes glanced at Fluffy. Nonsense, how could this prince feel shameful for a cat? This prince is tired, farewell. When he saw Yarrow Moen walk over, Yi Junqing immediately strode out of Guan Osprey Palace like a gust of wind. "Your Highness, the esteemed prince seems to be very afraid of you," said Ting Yu sincerely. "Is that so?" Yarrow Moen looked in the direction Yi Junqing had left in with a playful expression. "It's very obvious." Ting Yu nodded firmly. "Go check on Fluffy." Yi Junqing also had times when he was afraid of someone. This was something that had never happened before in her memory. When Ting Yu heard this, she walked over to Fluffy's side. Only then did she realize that Fluffy was sleeping very deeply and showed no signs of waking up. "How could this be?" "Your Highness, quickly come over, something seems to be wrong with Fluffy," Ting Yu called out anxiously. When Yarrow Moen heard this, she walked over to Fluffy's side. Based on her experience, Fluffy had probably been drugged. It was Yi Junqing? Impossible. Yi Junqing had always disdained this sort of lowly trick. "Yin Shui." Yarrow Moen immediately called out Yin Shui. A black figure appeared in front of Yarrow Moen with a whoosh. It was so fast that it only took a moment for the wind to rise and fall. "Where did the esteemed prince go earlier?" asked Yarrow Moen solemnly. Replying, "Master, the esteemed prince saw Mingyu take Fluffy away, so he followed her to Pureflower's palace. When he saw that Yarrow Sulwan was about to cut open Fluffy's stomach, the esteemed prince stopped her in time and brought Fluffy back." According to Yarrow Moen's instructions, no matter if it was day or night, Yin Shui was to protect Yi Junqing in secret as long as he left Guan Osprey Palace. This was also Yang Nanxing's original intention when he had sent Yin Shui to her. "Cut open his stomach. Consort Li is so heartless," said Ting Yu hatefully as she looked towards Fluffy. "Yarrow Sulwan. Yin Shui, think of a way to investigate Chu Mingyu's background. This consort wants to know why she would willingly follow and Bingshan." Yarrow Moen lowered her gaze towards Fluffy, a cold light flashing in her eyes. Normally, after a cat caught a mouse, it wouldn't bite it to death. Instead, it would slowly tease it until the mouse was on its last breath. Only then would it deal the fatal blow. This Yarrow Sulwan was clearly still alive, but she was still very far from being on her last breath. "Yes." Yin Shui accepted the order and withdrew. Right at this time, Liu Xing rushed in from outside the palace. "Your Highness, this servant has investigated. Little young master is the illegitimate child of third madam and Ju Chengwu. He's not old master's son at all," reported Liu Xing while gasping for breath. "The evidence is conclusive." That day, when Yarrow Yu had unintentionally mentioned the uncle who had sent the snow honey, Yarrow Moen had noticed the unnatural nervousness on Sumu's face. In particular, her subconscious action of pulling Yarrow Yu had aroused her suspicions. Replying, Your Highness, the evidence is conclusive. What Old Master knows about Little Young Master's age is younger than Little Young Master's actual age by 3 months. This servant found the midwife who had delivered Little Young Master at the time. The midwife said that Little Young Master hadn't been born prematurely but was a full-term baby. Not only that, this servant had also secretly taken Little Young Master's and Ju Chungwoo's blood and tested the blood. The 2 drops of blood had really fused together, said Liu Xing firmly. Then why would the midwife lie to father? Asked Yarrow Moen with a serious expression. Because that midwife was Ju Chungwoo's distant relative and had received quite a bit of benefits from Ju Chungwoo. However, this servant had given her even more benefits, so she was willing to tell this servant the truth, said Liu Xing truthfully. What a bold Sumuzi. She actually dared to do this under the nose of the Prime Minister. If it wasn't for father's love for his son, he would have long thought of the clues. That's why people say that everyone has a weakness, don't you think so? Yarrow Moen smiled sweetly as her beautiful eyes fell on Liu Xing. Your Highness, should we tell Old Master about this? Liu Xing looked towards Yarrow Moen apprehensively with a bit of anticipation in his eyes. Of course we have to let father know. He cares so much about his son's inheritance, how could such an important matter be hidden from him? Yarrow Moen had a matter-of-fact expression, but the smile in her eyes was so deep that it was hard to see through. But if Old Master knew, Third Madam and Little Young Master would definitely die a miserable death. Moreover, Old Master would also be disappointed. Liu Xing lowered his eyes. This was the first time he had doubts about Yarrow Moen's decision. Chapter 91. If father had really been able to bring Do Xianglan to justice, then he would still be Moen's most respected father. However, when he found out that eldest sister had passed away, Yarrow Zhenting very gently helped Do Xianglan up from the ground. He was extremely attentive and even ordered people to throw mother into the mass grave right in front of Do Xianglan. From that moment on, Yarrow Zhenting and I, Yarrow Moen, no longer had any relationship at all. Liu Xing, you are a servant of Yarrow residence, so there is nothing wrong with being loyal to Yarrow Zhenting. However, between Yarrow Zhenting and Ben Gong, you must make a choice. This includes Ting Yu as well. From now on, Yarrow Mo Wan has nothing to do with Yarrow Xiong residence. If you don't agree, you can leave at any time. Yarrow Mo Wan's expression was grave. Her deep eyes were like 2 vast and boundless night skies, crystal clear and bright. Liu Xing is not a servant of Prime Minister Yarrow's residence. Liu Xing is Master's servant. I will follow Master for my entire life, until the day I die. Liu Xing's eyes brimmed with tears as he firmly vowed. This servant was saved by Second Madam and is only loyal to Second Madam and Young Miss. As long as Young Miss says the word, this servant will climb a mountain of swords and plunge into a sea of flames without any complaint. Ting Yu knelt down next to Yarrow Mo Wan and spoke with certainty. Yarrow Moen let out a light sigh of relief when she saw that Ting Yu and Liu Xing had resolutely replied to her. This layer of paper was going to be exposed sooner or later, so it was better to say it now. This way, they wouldn't be distracted if they worked with doubts. All of you, stand up. As for Sumuzi and Yarrow Yu, this consort naturally has a way to ensure their safety. You don't need to worry about this. Yarrow Moen took a step forward and slowly helped Ting Yu and Liu Xing up as she spoke gently. After dinner, the first thing Yi Junqing did when he stepped into Guan Osprey Palace was look towards the chaise lounge. When he saw that Fluffy was lying lazily on it, he sighed in relief. Prince, the meal has been prepared. Niang Niang is waiting for you to eat together. When Ting Yu saw Yi Junqing standing at the palace gates hesitantly, she immediately called out to him. Once Yi Junqing sat down at the table, Ting Yu tactfully retreated. Yarrow Moen picked up the wine pot by the side of the jadeite table and slowly got up to walk to Yi Junqing's side to pour him a cup of fine jasper wine. You didn't poison the wine, did you? Yi Junqing lifted his brows. Ever since he moved into Guan Osprey Palace, this was the first time Yarrow Moen had acted so friendly. There was a saying that went, when something abnormal happened, there must be a reason behind it. Yarrow Mo Wan's current behavior was very abnormal. Would Moan be that kind? Yarrow Moan poured herself a cup. Good intentions? Yi Junqing was a bit confused. Yarrow Moan's way of thinking always differed from his. If poisoning him was considered having good intentions, then if Yarrow Mo Wn had bad intentions towards him, he really didn't dare to think about it. Of course. Moan doesn't want to send Prince to reunite with eldest sister. Moan has always been sinister and scheming since she was a child. Yarrow Moan had originally prepared a bunch of words of thanks to Yi Junqing for saving Fluffy. Unfortunately, Yi Junqing's first sentence ruined what was supposed to be a beautiful atmosphere, and the two of them immediately started arguing with each other. Can you not speak so harshly? Don't you know that sincerity can move the heart and the person will respond with sincerity? Yi Junqing was extremely speechless, but he still raised his wine cup. Sincerity? No. In the past, Moan only knew how to deceive herself and others, but now, she had learned how to deceive others. That's why Prince's request is also very harsh, said Yarrow Moan with a shrug. Then she raised her wine cup towards Yi Junqing. For a split second, Yi Junqing felt like he should just flick his sleeves and leave after hearing this. However, what surprised even Yi Junqing was that he actually followed Yarrow Moan's actions and raised his cup, then finished the wine in the cup. It seemed that Yarrow Moan had really trained him. Actually, what sort of grudge do you have with Consort Li? She seems to hate you a lot as well. Yi Junqing put down his wine cup and turned to look towards Yarrow Moan. For a moment, he actually felt that Yarrow Moan was very similar to Morshine. That bright and beautiful face seemed to always hide a mystery that he couldn't touch. She just doesn't look pleasing to the eye, but I'll make her hate me even more. Yarrow Moan lifted the blue-glazed orchid wine pot, poured herself a cup, and drank it in one gulp. You wouldn't be planning on doing anything to her, right? She seems to be in a very miserable state right now. Losing a child, losing favor, and being demoted to a consort. In Yi Junqing's eyes, or perhaps in most people's eyes, Yarrow Sulwan was indeed very miserable. However, in Yarrow Moan's eyes, this was nothing. Compared to everything she had endured, this was nothing more than a feather. See, Moan said that you two had an affair, but you just have to be stubborn. Yarrow Moan drank her third cup of wine, then leaned over the table and tilted her head to look towards Yi Junqing. Her curly eyelashes blinked, and the light in her eyes was like a gentle breeze that tickled one's heart. You. What are you looking at? Yi Junqing swallowed hard. He didn't dare to meet Yarrow Moan's gaze, so his entire body seemed extremely uneasy. You're blushing. It seems that you're feeling guilty. Yarrow Moan's cherry lips curved into a beautiful smile. The beauty was slightly tipsy, and her cheeks were red. Any man would have such thoughts when they saw this. You. Aren't you also red? Who doesn't drink to their head? Yi Junqing immediately covered his face as he continued to explain boldly. Yarrow Moan couldn't help but laugh when she saw Yi Junqing's helpless expression. What are you laughing at? You're blushing when you drink, what's so funny? Yi Junqing's expression turned red. He suddenly felt like he had been teased. Right at this time, Ting Yu's voice came from outside the door. Your Highness, Consort Xian sent Qian Shi to bring over a cup of nourishing ginseng soup. Ting Yu's tone was clearly questioning. Ian, bring it in. Yarrow Moan stopped teasing and said solemnly. When she finished speaking, the palace doors opened and Qian Shi walked in respectfully with a box of food in her hands. This servant Qian Shi kowtows in salute to the esteemed prince and consort Yao. Her clear voice was decisive and straightforward. Yarrow Moan carefully examined Qian Shi. Among the four noble consorts, Consort Xian was the most intelligent and shrewd, so a palace maid trained by her naturally wouldn't be bad. If she hadn't discovered that Yu Funning had fallen in love with Yi Junqing today, she might have left her until the end. Rise. For Yarrow Moan, back when she was in a high position, these four consorts had more or less played tricks behind her back. However, she didn't hate them. If one didn't act for themselves, the heavens would destroy them. So even though there wasn't any hatred between them, Yarrow Moan still wanted to use these four noble consorts to attack the Wang, Xie, Yu, and Huan clans behind them and shake the foundations of Great Chu. As the saying goes, ambitious and ruthless people emerge in troubled times. This was a necessary condition for Yi Junqing to soar into the heavens, as well as the only way to send Yi Hongyi to hell. Reporting to Consort Yarrow, this ginseng soup was specially ordered by my Nyang Nyang to the Imperial Kitchen's chef. Using 1,000-year-old ginseng as the base, it was slowly simmered for 6 hours. It is an excellent tonic. I hope Nyang Nyang will kindly accept it. Qian Shi was humble and polite, her tone appropriate. Then it's definitely something good. Yarrow Moen's gaze was pure without a trace of impurity. Yi Juanqing's lips couldn't help but twitch. She really got into character so quickly. It's naturally the best if it's sent to Guan Osprey Palace. Qian Shi nodded slightly. Yen, His Majesty said that the best things should be used where they're needed the most. Junqing, go bring Fluffy over. She needs nourishment right now. Yarrow Moen looked towards Yi Junqing innocently as her lips curved in a bright smile. Yi Junqing had just taken a mouthful of porridge and almost choked. Cough cough. You. What did you say? Yi Juanqing's eyes were fixed on Yarrow Moen's peerless appearance. He could deeply feel that the more harmless Yarrow Moen's appearance was, the more black-bellied her heart was. I'm so close to you, can't you hear what I'm saying? I want you to bring Fluffy over, hurry up. As Yarrow Moen spoke, she pulled Yi Junqing up. Got it. Yi Junqing sighed and angrily walked over to the chaise lounge. He picked up Fluffy unwillingly and walked back to Yarrow Moen's side. What's your name again? Yarrow Moen turned to look towards Qian Shi. Replying Consort Yarrow, this servant is Qian Shi. Qian Shi's expression didn't change, but she was actually extremely shocked. She couldn't imagine that the esteemed prince who had once commanded the winds and clouds and galloped on the battlefield would actually be ordered around by a fool. This was practically an insult to the esteemed prince. Chapter 92. Not drinking. Yi Junqing resisted the urge to go berserk and said through gritted teeth. At the side, Qian Shi almost fell over. How could she? How could she let the esteemed prince drink something that a beast had drunk? Qian Shi couldn't imagine just how much the esteemed prince had suffered after living in Guan Osprey Palace for so long. Good intentions aren't rewarded. You should know that I don't give something this good to just anyone. Yarrow Moen glared at Yi Junqing, then took Fluffy and stroked it gently. She didn't give it to just anyone, she gave it to a beast. Yi Junqing clenched his teeth until they hurt. Only after Qian Shi left did Yi Junqing look towards Yarrow Moen hatefully. Why are you bullying this prince? If I didn't bully you, why would anyone stand up for you? Yarrow Moen said disapprovingly. Are you going to do something bad again? Yi Junqing suppressed the anger in his eyes and asked suspiciously. You guessed right, something very, very bad. How about it? Are you interested in participating? Yarrow Moen's cherry lips suddenly curved up into a brilliant smile. Are you crazy? Yi Junqing rolled his eyes at her. That's right. How did you know? Yarrow Moen looked towards Yi Junqing innocently. When Yi Junqing heard this, he slid down from his chair. As she walked through the corridors of the Imperial Garden, Su Muzi thought that if it wasn't for Yarrow Moen, she probably wouldn't have had the chance to walk through the Imperial Palace. However, she was a bit apprehensive about Yarrow Moen suddenly wanting to see her. Even when she stepped into Guan Osprey Palace, Su Muzi still felt like it was a bit unreal. Shu Mother, quickly come in. Tingyu, go to the Imperial Kitchen and prepare some delicious pastries. I'll bring them back for Shu Mother in a bit. Yarrow Moen looked towards Su Muzi with a modest smile, then glanced meaningfully at Tingyu. Tingyu understood tacitly and left the main hall, closing the door behind her. This commoner woman kowtows in salute to Consort Yarrow Niang Niang. Consort Yarrow Niang Niang may be blessed. In her memories, Yarrow Moen had always been this gentle. Although she only had the intelligence of a 7 or 8-year-old child, there wasn't anything bad about it. At the very least, she wouldn't rely on the authority of the Prime Minister residence to bully people. Shu Mother, why are you so polite? Quickly, get up. Yarrow Moen took 2 steps forward and pulled Su Muzi over to sit down. She casually pushed the freshly brewed tea in front of Su Muzi. "Thank you, Consort Yao." Su Muzi held the teacup nervously. Just by smelling it, she could tell that it was an extremely good tea. This was a good tea that she, as a maidservant, would never be able to drink in her entire life. "Shu mother, there's no need to be nervous. Moen only asked you to come here to give you a clear path." Yarrow Moen didn't hide anything and spoke bluntly. When Su Muzi heard this, she was shocked. Then she looked up at Yarrow Moen in disbelief. Shu mother should have already guessed Moen's current state, right? Yarrow Moen smiled sweetly, her eyes as warm as water. Su Muzi gripped her teacup tightly with both hands and stared blankly for a long time before she spoke. When Yua told this common woman that the method was taught by Nyang Nyang, this common woman felt that Nyang Nyang was no longer the third miss of that time. Now it seems that Nyang Nyang has truly recovered her clarity. This is worthy of celebration. Su Muzi did not refute this and respectfully replied. As expected, Shu mother is intelligent. This is Yua's good fortune. Yarrow Moen lifted her teacup and took a small sip. It is Yua's good fortune to have an older sister like Consort Yarrow. Su Muzi had maintained a humble attitude the entire time and was very careful when she spoke. Shu mother is truly the same as Wanna's mother, always so cautious. It makes one's heart ache to see you like this. A trace of sorrow flashed through Yarrow Moen's heart. Whether it was her mother or Su Muzi, they shouldn't have been like this. For people as lowly as them, when faced with power, other than compromising and allowing themselves to be trampled upon, what else could they do? Su Muzi only listened quietly and didn't interrupt. There's no wall in this world that doesn't have a crack. Regarding Yarrow Yu's identity, you can hide it for a while, but you can't hide it forever. If one day, father finds out the truth, what do you think he will do? Yarrow Moen took a deep breath and got straight to the point. When Su Muzi heard this, the teacup in her hand fell to the ground with a bang and her face instantly paled. Nyang Nyang. This common woman doesn't know what Nyang Nyang is talking about. Su Muzi's entire body trembled. As she spoke, her legs slumped to the ground. If you don't know what Moen is talking about, then why are you kneeling? Since I'm able to say these words, then I naturally have complete confidence. Does Shu mother still need to quibble? Yarrow Moen got up and slowly helped Su Muzi up. Her voice was still as gentle as the wind. Nyang Nyang. Su Muzi swallowed hard and was forced to sit back down on the chair. She didn't dare to look directly at the woman in front of her. At this moment, she deeply felt that the current Consort Yarrow was like a completely different person from the innocent third miss of the past. Shu mother was probably forced by father, right? In reality, the person Shu mother likes is that physician Ju Chungwu. Could it be that you've never thought of taking Yarrow Yu and running away with him? Yarrow Moen's words had always been concise. She didn't need to probe Su Muzi's thoughts. If Su Muzi was the kind of woman who lusted after riches and honor, then she wouldn't have anything to do with that Ju Chungwu, much less treat the snow honey that Ju Chungwu sent as a treasure. Nyang Nyang is wise. This common woman was forced. Long before Lord wanted this common woman and Cheng Wu had already pledged to marry each other, and I was pregnant with Cheng Wu's child. This common woman didn't dare to resist and didn't dare to tell Lord the truth. Su Muzi sobbed uncontrollably as she recalled the past. That must be the case. You and this consort's mother are both people with bitter lives. It's a pity that mother has already passed away. Moen only hopes that Shu mother can live the life that she wants. If this consort gives you a chance, would Shu mother choose to leave Yarrow Xiongfu? Yarrow Moen's bright eyes were like the resplendent stars in the sky, suddenly illuminating Su Muzi's dead heart. Nyang Nyang. Nyang Nyang, what do you mean? Su Muzi raised her eyes excitedly and looked towards Yarrow Moen in disbelief. This consort will arrange for you, and Ju Chungwu to leave the imperial city. This consort will also guarantee your safety and give you enough silver to live. How about it? Yarrow Moen said bluntly. If that's really the case, then this common woman will shed tears of gratitude. Su Muzi was a person who valued relationships. Glory, splendor, wealth, and rank were just fleeting clouds. She just wanted to take and live peacefully with the person she loved. Now that Yarrow Moen had given her this kind of opportunity, she had to give it a try no matter what. Since that's the case, bring Yu to the Imperial Palace tomorrow. This consort naturally has arrangements. The corners of Yarrow Moen's lips hooked up. Her sincere and calm smile made Su Muzi trust her without any reason. Around 5 o'clock, Yarrow Moen was just about to instruct Tingyu to prepare dinner when Qian-shi suddenly arrived. Reporting to Consort Yarrow, "My family's Nyang has already prepared dinner and specially had Qian-shi invite Consort Yarrow to Fragrant Steps Pavilion for a small gathering. Esteemed Prince, please come with us so that you won't have nowhere to eat." Qian-shi bowed respectfully in a humble manner. Small gathering? Yarrow Moen widened her eyes as she looked towards Tingyu in confusion. "Nyang, it's Consort Xian Nyang who's inviting you to her place for a meal," Tingyu explained in a simple and easy-to-understand manner. "All right. There'll definitely be a lot of good food. Tingyu, how about we bring Fluffy as well?" Yarrow Moen tugged on Tingyu like a spoiled child. "Fluffy has already fallen asleep. Consort Xian's intention is to bring the esteemed prince as well. Otherwise, he won't have anywhere to eat," continued Tingyu. "Bring Junqing? But what if Fluffy wakes up and goes to look for him?" Yarrow Moen looked towards Tingyu. "Nyang, don't worry, Fluffy won't wake up that quickly. How about we bring the esteemed prince?" At the side, although Qian-shi's expression didn't change, she was actually a bit displeased. No matter how one looked at it, it felt like the esteemed prince wasn't even as noble as a cat. "All right then." Yarrow Moen nodded reluctantly. If Guan Osprey Palace didn't prepare a meal, then he really wouldn't have anywhere to eat. More importantly, he really wanted to know who Yarrow Moen found displeasing to the eye this time. When they arrived in front of Fragrant Steps Pavilion, Yarrow Moen smelled the faint fragrance of orchids. The fragrance was elegant and leisurely. It made one feel relaxed. In the entire inner palace, Yu Funning was probably the only one who had the ability to fill the entire palace with this fragrance day and night. It had to be known that this fragrance didn't come from perfume, but from real orchids. Chapter 93. This concubine greets the esteemed prince, greets Consort Yao. When she saw the azure figure appear in the main hall of Fragrant Steps Pavilion, Yu Funning instantly felt a wave of spring breeze caress her face, and it was refreshing and warm. That face was like that of a divine general, and it caused one to be intoxicated with a single glance and be unable to free themselves. "You're also a noble consort, so why are you bowing?" Yarrow Moen looked towards Yu Funning in confusion. "Your Highness, you're a noble consort with this surname, so your rank is one rank higher," explained Tingyu in a small voice. "Aya, bowing back and forth is the most troublesome. Hurry and get up, where's the good food? I'm hungry." Yarrow Moen happily pulled Yu Funning up with an impatient expression. "Consort Yarrow, please come inside." The moment Yarrow Moen pulled her up, Yu Funning finally began to carefully examine this harem's pampered fool. Her appearance could be said to be stunning, but her actions were like those of a child. The exquisite table made of jade and turquoise glowed faintly under the candlelight. The delicacies on the table were dazzling. Not only were the 20 dishes bright and fragrant, but the designs were also complex. It was clear how much effort had been put into them. "Esteemed Prince, please sit. Consort Yao, please." When Yu Funning had heard Qian-shi describe Yi Juanqing's pitiful state in Guan Osprey Palace, she really wanted to charge straight to Guan Osprey Palace and fiercely slap Yarrow Moen. However, with her status, she could only think about it. Consort Xian is considerate. Then Junqing will respectfully accept. As they walked, Yi Junqing coldly watched Yarrow Moen's every move. If it wasn't for the fact that he deeply understood how black-bellied she was, he really might have been fooled by Yarrow Moen's current appearance. Naive and unaffected. "Pa. You sit to the side. I want to sit here." Before Yi Junqing could sit, Yarrow Moen pushed him aside and sat down on the main seat. Yi Junqing hadn't expected Yarrow Moen to suddenly push him and instantly stumbled. By the time he steadied himself, his face had already turned pale. "Prince, are you all right?" If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, Yu Fanning would never have imagined that Yarrow Moen would treat Yi Junqing like this. For better or for worse, he was still a prince, yet she didn't feel any fear at all. For a moment, Yu Fanning hated Yi Hongyi to the core. If it weren't for his slander, Yi Junqing wouldn't have ended up like this. If it wasn't for his favor, Yarrow Mo Wan wouldn't be this arrogant. Forget it, this prince is fine. Yi Junqing took a deep breath before replying awkwardly. Qian Shi, pour some wine for his highness. Yi Junqing's reaction caused Yu Fanning's heart to ache to the extreme. He had once been an all-powerful king, but now he was being bullied by a fool. Even she, a bystander, couldn't bear to watch this. At the side, Qian Shi accepted the order and poured a cup of fine wine for Yi Junqing. The moment the cup was filled, Yarrow Moen snatched it away. Tingyu, this wine smells very good. Yarrow Moen didn't feel the slightest bit embarrassed after taking someone else's things and was even chatting and laughing with her maid. This was something that Yu Fanning couldn't tolerate. Consort Yarrow, if you want to drink, you should let your personal palace maid serve you. How could she snatch His Highness' wine cup? Yu Fanning clenched her teeth in anger. She had originally set up this banquet to see just how wronged Yi Junqing would feel, but now it seemed that Yarrow Moen's actions were even worse than Qian Shi's report. It's fine, he's already used to it, right? Yarrow Moen looked towards Yi Junqing innocently, a hint of playfulness in her pure eyes. Consort Xian doesn't need to mind, this prince will just get another cup. After all, this wasn't Guan Osprey Palace, so Yi Junqing endured Yarrow Moen's deliberate provocation. At this time, Qian Shi had already poured another cup of wine and placed it in front of Yi Junqing. During the banquet, every time Yi Junqing wanted to pick up some food, Yarrow Moen would beat him to it. For 2 hours, Yi Junqing practically hadn't eaten anything. Every time Yu Fanning spoke up, Yarrow Moen would block her with an innocent expression on her face. Junqing, you're pretty much done eating, so you should head back first. Fluffy should be awake by now. Just as Yi Junqing was about to raise his chopsticks, Yarrow Moen suddenly snatched them away from him. Yi Junqing's lips twitched when he saw Yarrow Moen snatch his chopsticks away. In the end, he chose to take a deep breath. What does Fluffy waking up have to do with Prince? Yu Fanning was at the end of her patience and her voice was no longer as calm as it had been at the beginning. His Fluffy's personal bodyguard Wan gave him the title. What do you think? Impressive, right? When Yarrow Moen sensed Yu Fanning's overflowing anger, an indescribable feeling flashed through her heart. Ahem. Many thanks for Consort Xian's hospitality today. This prince still has matters to attend to, so farewell. Yi Junqing was afraid that if he stayed any longer, he wouldn't be able to stop himself from falling out with Yarrow Moen. It was one thing for her to oppose him normally, but now she was humiliating him in front of outsiders. This was truly outrageous. Perhaps even Yi Junqing himself hadn't realized it, but in his heart, Yarrow Moen was already different from the other consorts in the inner palace. When Yu Fanning saw that Yi Junqing was about to leave, she immediately got up and hurriedly chased after him. She only returned after sending him off with her eyes until he disappeared into the night. The rest of the banquet was dull and dull. No matter what Yarrow Moen said, Yu Fanning kept thinking back to Yi Junqing's figure when he had just left. Loneliness, desolation, and faint sorrow. Whose fault was all this? Yarrow Moen? No, it was Yi Hongyi. If he hadn't schemed against Yi Junqing, he wouldn't have been reduced to being the bodyguard of an animal, and wouldn't have been ordered around by an idiot. She couldn't let Yi Junqing continue to be this dispirited, she couldn't. The food here is so delicious, can I bring some back for Fluffy? While Yu Fanning was deep in thought, Yarrow Moen put down her bowl and chopsticks and looked towards Yu Fanning pleadingly. Consort Yarrow, don't you think that you should also bring some back for the esteemed prince? When Yu Fanning saw Yarrow Moen's naive appearance, she felt extreme hatred. Did she think that she was worthy of bullying the esteemed prince? Did he not eat his fill? But it doesn't matter. In any case, he's always like this in Guan Osprey Palace, so it doesn't matter if he goes hungry. I want to bring some back for Fluffy, alright? Replied Yarrow Moen absent-mindedly. Qian Shi. Pack all of this back for Consort Yarrow. Yu Fanning's tone was icy cold. Once Yarrow Moen left, Yu Funing abruptly flipped over the phoenix table, flames burning in her eyes. Your Highness, who does she think she is to dare treat the esteemed prince like this? Qianxi, do you know that this consort really wanted to slap her just now? Could it be that she doesn't know that she's just an idiot? The esteemed prince isn't someone she can blaspheme. Yu Funing clenched her fists tightly as rage filled her heart. She's an idiot, but if the esteemed prince doesn't want to, who would be able to order him around? In the end, it's the esteemed prince who's given up on himself. Qianxi analyzed the situation as sorrow flashed through her eyes. Qianxi. This servant knows her wrongs. Qianxi was well aware of her master's feelings for Yi Junqing, so she definitely wouldn't want to hear the truth. Forget it, this consort won't let Yi Junqing continue to be this dispirited. He definitely can't. Yu Funing clenched her teeth as a cold light flashed through her eyes. Your Highness, what do you want? When Qianxi sensed Yu Funing's abnormality, she looked towards her master worriedly. He's dispirited because there's no hope left in his heart. If he found out the true cause of Yarrow Morshin's death, do you think he would still, Your Highness? You absolutely can't do this. If he finds out, he'll probably go against the heavens. Qianxi's expression was tense as she immediately turned around and closed the palace doors tightly before returning to Yu Funing's side. Going against the heavens is better than being a cat's bodyguard. Yu Funing roared fiercely. But have you ever thought about what would happen if he couldn't go against the heavens? Qianxi knew that whenever Master encountered matters related to the esteemed prince, she would get a bit too worked up. Otherwise, with Master's intelligence, how could she say something so ridiculous? As long as he wants it, this consort will do everything in my power to help him. Rather than watch him continue to be dispirited like this, it's better to give it a try. At that time, this consort might have a chance. A trace of hope flashed through Yu Funing's icy eyes. Yarrow Morshin was already dead, so there were no more obstacles for her. Your Highness, this servant understands your feelings towards the esteemed prince, but even if you want to do everything in your power, you still need to see the esteemed prince's reaction. Why don't you test him first? If the esteemed prince is willing to investigate the cause of Yarrow Morshin's death, then it wouldn't be too late for us to make plans then. She only wanted to calm Master down first. She had to report this sort of heaven-defying matter to the Master. You're absolutely right. Go and arrange this. This consort wants to see the esteemed prince's reaction with my own eyes. Yu Funing's eyes were as sharp as blades as she ordered coldly. Chapter 94. Your Highness, these are the pastries you wanted. After leaving Fragrant Steps Pavilion, Ting Yu had been sent to the imperial kitchen by Yarrow Moen. At this time, Ting Yu was walking in with a box of food. Ian, send it to the East Wing. Yarrow Moen nodded slightly. Just as Ting Yu was about to step out of the main hall, Yarrow Moen suddenly got up and stopped her. She took the box of food and walked to the East Wing alone. The bright moon shone brightly, sprinkling down a soft silk-like light. Yarrow Moen walked lightly around the corridor and walked to the door of the side room. Just as she was about to knock, she suddenly heard soft moaning coming from inside. How could there be such a domineering and arrogant woman like you in this world? There should be a limit to how much you can bully people. Did this prince come here just to be bullied by you? Preposterous. Who asked you to laugh? Yarrow Moen's lips curved slightly as she listened to the low curses coming from inside. She never knew that the Yi Junqing she knew had such a childish side to him. Back then, he had truly suppressed himself too much. Cough cough. Yarrow Moen deliberately coughed, then placed the pastries in front of the door and turned to leave. When they heard that cough, the cursing stopped. After a long while, the door opened and Yi Junqing glanced at the pastries at his feet. His expression instantly darkened. The next day, Su Muzi brought Yarrow Yu to the imperial palace as promised. Older sister Wanna, I missed you. The moment they entered Guan Osprey Palace, Yarrow Yu jumped into Yarrow Moen's arms happily. Older sister missed you too. Shu mother, sit. Ting Yu, brew some tea. Yarrow Moen casually pulled Yarrow Yu to her side. Her clear eyes carefully sized up the 4-year-old boy in front of her. She couldn't help but admit that she couldn't find any trace of her father on this boy's face. Niang Niang. On her seat, Su Muzi looked towards Yarrow Moen apprehensively, wanting to say something but hesitating. Ting Yu, take Yarrow Yu to the Imperial Garden to play. This consort has something to say to Shu Mother. Yarrow Moen had already arranged everything and was just waiting for the fish to take the bait. After Yarrow Yu left, Yarrow Moen handed the teacup to Su Muzi. Many thanks, Your Highness. Su Muzi accepted the teacup uneasily. Actually, this consort really likes Yua. It's his fortune to be able to leave Prime Minister Yarrow's residence. Otherwise, if this matter is exposed, he'll be the most pitiful one. After all, the child is innocent, said Yarrow Moen indifferently. With just a few words, Su Muzi's resolve was solidified. This common woman will never forget the Empress's great kindness. As long as the Empress commands, this common woman will definitely do it. Su Muzi put down the teacup and carefully knelt in front of Yarrow Moen. Now that things had reached this point, there was no way for her to turn back. More importantly, she had never thought of turning back. If Shu Mother truly has the heart to thank Moen, then help Moen put on a show, alright? Yarrow Moen slowly helped Su Muzi up, her voice gradually becoming gentler. When Su Muzi heard this, she couldn't help but look towards Yarrow Moen in confusion. Beside the Jade Water Lake, Ting Yu instructed Yarrow Yu a few times. She only turned around and left after making sure that Yarrow Yu understood her words. Empress, walk a bit slower. Since Third Madam has entered the palace, she shouldn't be leaving so quickly. In the Imperial Garden, Mingyu hurriedly followed Yarrow Sulwan's footsteps as she spoke worriedly. The rules of the palace stated that when relatives entered the palace, they had to report to the various palaces. When Mingyu told Yarrow Sulwan that Su Muzi had brought Yarrow Yu into the palace, Yarrow Sulwan, who had been circling around Pure Flower's palace for the past few days, suddenly ran out as if she had gone mad. Empress. Mingyu hadn't expected that Yarrow Sulwan would suddenly stop and almost bumped into Yarrow Sulwan. She actually dared to bring this lowly bastard in. When Yarrow Sulwan saw Yarrow Yu paddling in the water beside the Jade Water Lake, the hatred in her heart suddenly boiled. Empress. Mingyu subconsciously called out when she felt the coldness radiating from Yarrow Sulwan's body. This consort came out in a hurry and didn't bring a silk handkerchief. Go get it for this consort. Yarrow Sulwan took a deep breath and ordered coldly. The servant girl that had followed her for 7 years dared to trick her, so this Mingyu definitely couldn't be trusted either. Yarrow Sulwan thought. This servant will go now. Mingyu deliberately ignored the silk handkerchief in Yarrow Sulwan's hands and respectfully retreated. When she saw that there was no one around, Yarrow Sulwan's eyes turned cold and she walked towards Yarrow Yu viciously. Little bastard. This consort is asking you. Was it that lowly bastard Yarrow Moen who hid you in Guan Osprey Palace that day? The cold voice contained a bone-piercing chill. In the past few days that Yarrow Sulwan had locked herself in her room, she had been thinking about everything that had happened recently. These things looked like coincidences, but Yarrow Moen seemed to be involved in all of them. First, Yarrow Moen had brought back the missing Yarrow Yu. Then, there was the saffron incident. Yarrow Moen also seemed to have appeared at the wrong time. Then, there was the fact that Yarrow Moen actually knew that swindler by Mai. There were many other things that seemed suspicious now that she thought about it. She suddenly had a thought. Was that Yarrow Moen really stupid? Even though she felt that her thoughts were laughable, she really didn't know how to explain these coincidences. Who are you? Yarrow Yu only lifted his head to glance at Yarrow Sulwan before continuing to play in the water, ignoring her. Are you blind? This consort is your second older sister, shouted Yarrow Sulwan angrily. You're that lowly bastard's second older sister? Then what are you? Yarrow Yu lifted his brows as he looked towards Yarrow Sulwan with a face full of disdain and ridicule. It was very hard to imagine that a 4-year-old child would say such harsh words. Yarrow Sulwan was instantly infuriated and her expression became unreadable. What a good little bastard. You actually dare to scold this consort. Don't think that just because father dotes on you that you can be out of control. This is the Imperial Palace. Someone like you dares to talk back to this consort. As Yarrow Sulwan spoke, she abruptly walked forward and grabbed Yarrow Yu's collar, forcefully dragging him in front of her. Ah! Just as Yarrow Sulwan was about to let go of Yarrow Yu, she felt a sharp pain on her wrist. When she turned her hand back, she saw that there was a needle mark on her wrist. You. What about me? Yu has grown up. No one dares to bully Yu, and no one dares to bully Mother. Yarrow Yu stood in front of Yarrow Sulwan, his large eyes filled with hostility. Take out the needles. How could Yarrow Sulwan be willing to be bullied by a child? She abruptly walked forward and grabbed Yarrow Yu, shaking him with all her might. Go away. Go away. Yarrow Yu panicked slightly when he saw Yarrow Sulwan pouncing at him like a mad dog. He immediately took out the silver needles from his pocket and stabbed them at Yarrow Sulwan with all his might. Right at this moment, Su Muse's anxious voice came from the arched bridge nearby. You. This call suddenly made Yarrow Yu remember what Ting Yu had just told him. Thus, before Yarrow Sulwan could react, Yarrow Yu suddenly turned around and jumped into Jade Lake. The lake splashed and Yarrow Sulwan instinctively covered it with her sleeves. By the time she pulled back her sleeves, the lake had already calmed down. Chapter 95. Second Miss. You can't leave. Return my Yua. Return my Yua. Seeing that Yarrow Sulwan was about to leave, Su Muse suddenly hugged Yarrow Sulwan's legs, tears pouring down like a flood. I already said it's none of my business. He jumped down himself. He doesn't know how to swim. Yarrow Sulwan's face paled slightly and her voice grew weaker. Yua doesn't know how to swim. How could he have jumped down himself? Second Miss, you have such a malicious heart. This commoner woman won't let you off even if I die. Someone come. Save Yua. Su Muse hugged Yarrow Sulwan tightly the entire time. Right at this time, Yarrow Moen brought Ting Yu and Liu Xing running over. Shu Mother. What happened? Yarrow Moen looked in shock at Su Muse, who was hugging Yarrow Sulwan tightly on the ground. Third Miss, you have to uphold justice for this commoner woman. Second Miss, she personally pushed Yua into the water. Yua, Mother is coming to accompany you. The moment Su Muse heard Yarrow Moen's voice, she suddenly let go of Yarrow Sulwan and charged straight into Jade Lake. Not good. Third Madam doesn't know how to swim. When Liu Xing saw this, he immediately stepped forward and pulled Su Muse back. You said Yua fell into the lake. How could it be like this? Second older sister, why did you push Yua in? Someone come quickly. Save him. Yarrow Moen hurriedly ran to the lakeside, tears streaming down her face. Not long after, the Imperial Guards that rushed over all jumped into Jade Lake. However, even after searching for a long time, they didn't find Yarrow Yu's figure. There was only a pair of purple satin boots by the lakeside. What happened? Yi Hongyi, who had rushed over after hearing the news, walked to the lakeside with heavy steps. Your Majesty, Yua fell into the lake. Wah. I beg you to save Yua, all right. Moen only has this one Didi, father only has this one son. Wah. Wana doesn't want anything to happen to Didi. Yarrow Sulwan had just opened her mouth when Yarrow Moen seized the opportunity. Where is he? You still haven't fished him out. Yi Hongyi pulled Yarrow Moen into his embrace with both hands, his sharp eyes fiercely glaring at the leader of the guards. Replying to Your Majesty, this subordinate has already ordered people to go down and search, but they haven't found the little Gongzi. This Jade Lake is directly connected to the moat outside the city, and the river water also converges with the lake outside. This subordinate is afraid that the little Gongzi's body has already been swept out of the Jade Lake. The leader of the Imperial bodyguards truthfully reported. No. My Yua. You can't leave your mother. Yua. Hearing these words, Su Muse, who was being pulled by Liu Xing, let out an anguished howl and collapsed to the ground, tears streaming down her face. Yua. Right at this time, Yarrow Moen suddenly heard a shout not too far away. When she raised her eyes slightly, she saw Yarrow Junting stumbling over. In the end, it was her son's strength that came so quickly. However, it seemed that the blow wasn't light. Yarrow Sulwan, you really can't bully me in this lifetime. Even if you bully my cat, you have to pay the price. The smile on Yarrow Moen's lips disappeared in a flash. Then, she sobbed and leaned against Yi Hongyi's side, coldly watching the show. Return my Yu-Er's life. Yarrow Sulwan. Return my Yu-Er's life. Su Muzi was no longer as submissive as she usually was. She abruptly broke free from Liu Xing's restraints and threw herself in front of Yarrow Sulwan, then reached out to choke her. Hey! You crazy woman! Let go of Ben Gong. Hurry and let go. Someone come. Your Majesty. Yarrow Sulwan hadn't expected that Su Muzi would be so strong. That sudden feeling of suffocation made her panic and she continuously pushed Su Muzi away with both hands. Just what exactly happened? Where is this old man's Yu-Er? Yarrow Junting even forgot the etiquette of a subject as he rushed in front of Su Muzi and pulled her away from Yarrow Sulwan. Master, you have to get revenge for Yu-Er. It's Second Miss. It's Second Miss who personally pushed Yu-Er into Jade Lake. This concubine saw it clearly. Su Muzi roared at the top of her lungs, her tears falling like pearls from a broken necklace. He didn't. He jumped in himself. Father. Sulwan really didn't. Yarrow Sulwan covered her snow-white neck with both hands as she desperately sucked in air. She continuously shook her head as she looked towards Yarrow Junting. Where's Yu-Er? Did you manage to save him? The rims of Yarrow Junting's eyes filled with tears. In that instant, he seemed to have aged 10 years and his body couldn't stop swaying. Replying Your Majesty, replying Prime Minister. This subordinate has already ordered people to search the entire Jade Lake, but they haven't found Little Gong's whereabouts. I'm afraid that he's already rushed out of Jade Lake, said the guard leader in a low voice. Continue searching, said Yi Hongyi coldly as he tightened his grip on Yarrow Moen as if he wanted to comfort her. However, Yarrow Moen found this action laughable. The one who needed comfort right now wasn't her son. This old man's son. Yarrow Sulwan. Why? Yu-Er is only 4 years old. How could you be so heartless? Your Majesty, you have to uphold justice for this old man. The guard leader's words couldn't be more obvious. Yarrow Yu definitely couldn't be saved and it was very likely that he wouldn't even have a corpse left. For Yarrow Junting, who had a son in his middle age, this was undoubtedly the greatest blow. It was even more painful than taking his life. Father. Father. Why don't you believe me? It wasn't this concubine who pushed him, he was the one who jumped in by himself. Furthermore, I'm also your daughter. We haven't even gotten to the bottom of the matter yet and you want me to pay for that bastard's life. Yarrow Sulwan stared at Yarrow Junting with bloodshot eyes. In this instant, she suddenly didn't know why she had struggled so hard to climb up. You're the bastard. You bastard. Give me back my son. Yarrow Junting glared at Yarrow Sulwan. Every word he said was like a sharp knife stabbing into Yarrow Sulwan's heart. If this matter really was Consort Li's doing, then Jin will naturally return justice to Yarrow Yu. However, Jin will come to a conclusion after we've investigated this matter. Don't be afraid. No matter what happens, Jin will be by your side, said Yi Hongyi coldly. Then he pulled the sobbing Yarrow Moen away from Jade Lake. Your Majesty. As she looked at Yi Hongyi's cold and emotionless figure, Yarrow Sulwan staggered backwards a few steps. How could she have fallen into such an unbearable situation? When she was at her most isolated and helpless, her man ignored her and her father even wanted to take her life, but she hadn't done anything. That bastard jumped in himself. Who would believe her? Who would believe her? Master. Our Yu-Er. This concubine has let you down. Yu-Er. Su Muzi had wanted to kneel in front of Yarrow Junting, but the moment she opened her mouth, her vision darkened and she fainted. At the side, Liu Xing hurriedly helped Su Muzi steady herself. Liu Xing, send Third Madam back to the residence. Yarrow Junting endured the bone-piercing despair as he looked towards the calm Jade Lake with tears streaming down his face. Father. Yarrow Sulwan tried to speak but was interrupted by Yarrow Junting. This old man doesn't have a daughter as vicious as you. Yarrow Junting's voice was bone-chillingly cold. Yarrow Sulwan looked at the man in front of her dejectedly. Perhaps this man, who she had called father for over 20 years, had never had a daughter like her in his heart. Since that was the case, Why should she keep thinking about this father-daughter relationship? Enchanting, no matter how many times this consort says it, you guys still don't plan on believing this consort, right? Sulwan suddenly restrained the sorrow in her eyes and calmly walked to Enchanting's side. Enchanting looked indifferently at the jade lake without saying a word. Forget it, this consort isn't interested in what you guys are thinking. But remember, if something happens to this consort, you won't be any better off. Mother has evidence of all the good things you've done, so, Enchanting, you better bless this consort with a long life. For me. Sulwan snorted coldly, then turned around to leave Enchanting. She had never thought that there would be a day when she and her father would reach this step, a step that could not be reversed. After returning to Guan Osprey Palace, Yi Hongyi comforted Yarrow Moen for a good while before leaving. As she listened to Yi Hongyi's footsteps gradually fade away, Yarrow Moen's lips curved into a cold smile. Chapter 96. Very good. Yarrow Moen nodded slightly and picked up the teacup. She took a sip. The tea was rich and fragrant. Niang niang. Liu Xing looked at Yarrow Moen and hesitated. What is it? Didn't you say to tell Master about little young Master? Asked Liu Xing in confusion. Naturally, he must know about this. However, not now, but after he finishes Yarrow Yu's funeral. Yarrow Moen's eyes curved, the light in her eyes dazzling. What astonished Yarrow Moen was that Enchanting's final explanation to Yi Hongyi was that Yarrow Yu accidentally fell into the water and that it had nothing to do with Yarrow Sulwan. With these words, Yi Hongyi naturally wouldn't punish Yarrow Sulwan. However, Yarrow Moen knew that after this matter, Yarrow Sulwan would no longer have a father. At the same time that Enchanting lost his son, he also lost a daughter. The funeral was grand and sensational, showing how much Enchanting valued his son. Yarrow Sulwan said she was sick and didn't return to pay her respects. On the day Yarrow Moen returned, Su Muzi went crazy in the morning hall. Getting rid of the donkey after it was no longer of use was Enchanting's style. For a crazy woman, Enchanting increasingly didn't care about Su Muzi. After Su Muzi got lost, he didn't even send people to look for her. In Guan Osprey Palace, Yarrow Moen stroked Fluffy's growing belly with a faint smile on her face. Niang niang, this servant has given your 1,000 taels to Third Madam and safely escorted them out of the imperial city to the people Ben Xianfeng sent to receive them, reported Liu Xing. You did well, you can go rest. Yarrow Moen nodded slightly. Ever since Yarrow Yu's accident, in order to comfort Yarrow Moen, Yi Hongyi would bring her to Central Dragon Palace every day to eat. When he had nothing to do, he would stay by her side, afraid that Yarrow Moen would be too sad and harm her body. This action was extremely ironic to Yarrow Moen. At the time, she had neglected sleeping and eating for Yi Hongyi, but she hadn't seen him do this. Niang niang, at that time, Unicorn came to pass a message saying that His Majesty is busy with government affairs and can't accompany Niang niang to eat. This servant has already prepared the meal. Ting Yu ordered the palace maid to place the food on the table and then walked to Yarrow Moen's side. "Ian, you guys can leave." Yarrow Moen nodded and put Fluffy down. When she slowly walked to the table, a familiar smell assailed her nose. It should have been 6 or 7 days since they last ate at the same table, Yarrow Moen thought. "Are you all right?" Yi Junqing was dressed in an azure robe as he walked over to Yarrow Moen. His tone was slightly probing, but it was mostly comforting. After all, in his opinion, Yarrow Moen still doted on her younger brother a lot. "Very good. Moen has always been the type of person who grows stronger the more you scold her." Yarrow Moen raised her clear eyes. Her bright eyes flickered with a strange light and the smile on her lips seemed to have a deeper meaning. Cough cough. This prince thought you'd forgotten. Thinking back to that night, he hadn't slept a wink since Yarrow Moen left. Moen has always been one to hold grudges, especially when Prince scolded me so harshly. "It's hard for Moen to forget," said Yarrow Moen resentfully as she picked up the porcelain bowl. "This king thought you would be very sad." Yi Junqing slowly sat down and began to size up the woman in front of him again. Even though she had experienced such a blow, she acted as if nothing had happened. Yarrow Moen didn't say anything and continued to eat. It's your scheme, right? Yarrow, you didn't die, right? Yi Junqing suddenly stood up and looked towards Yarrow Moen. He abruptly smacked his forehead. How could he have forgotten? This woman always liked to play the pig to eat the tiger. You're using Yarrow Yu to frame Yarrow Sulwan? But now that you've caused such a ruckus, how is Yarrow Yu supposed to come back from the dead? Third Madam of the Prime Minister residence has already gone crazy. If Yarrow Yu finds out. Yi Junqing looked towards Yarrow Moen angrily, but when he saw Yarrow Moen's absent-minded expression, he stopped speaking and sat back down. Third Madam is worthy of you. Why? Yi Junqing's calm brows furrowed. In this moment, he suddenly realized that Yarrow Moen had far too many secrets. No matter how much he investigated, he couldn't find the source. Prince wants to know. Yarrow Moen sighed and put down her chopsticks. She looked up at Yi Junqing with a playful expression. Yi Junqing nodded. He really wanted to know. How about Prince sing Immortal Linjiang for Moen? If you sing it well, Moen might tell Prince. Yarrow Moen's gentle smile was enough to topple cities and countries. When Yi Junqing heard this, his expression instantly darkened. He immediately sat down at the table and picked up his bowl without saying a word. What a joke! No matter how bad he was still a prince. He wouldn't have fallen to the point of selling himself. He didn't have to know either. Even if he wanted to know, he wouldn't beg this black-bellied fellow. Yi Junqing thought. After dinner, Yi Junqing returned to the east wing with a belly full of anger. As soon as he entered the room, he sensed that something was off. He immediately looked around cautiously and sighed in relief after confirming that there was no one around. When he lit a candle, he saw that there was a letter on the table. The Empress didn't die from a difficult birth. There's something fishy about this matter. The truth will be revealed at midnight at the former site of the Cold Palace. The hand that was holding the letter gradually tightened. His sharp gaze shot out an extreme coldness. At this moment, his grey and dead heart began to boil and beat with great strength. Yi Junqing clenched his teeth and the veins on his forehead bulged as if they were about to explode. Morshine didn't die from a difficult birth. How was that possible? Up until now, he had never doubted the cause of Morshine's death. In his opinion, Morshine's kindness was unparalleled in this world. Her love for Yi Hongyi was unparalleled. With a woman like this, Yi Hongyi would definitely cherish her tenfold, 100-fold. There shouldn't be any other reason for Morshine's death aside from a difficult birth. Yi Junqing tightly gripped the letter in his hand and his eyes flashed with coldness. In the next second, he rushed out the door and headed straight for the former site of the Cold Palace. Inside Guan Osprey Palace, Yarrow Moen sat by the dressing table and stared at her face in the mirror. The fear in Yarrow Sulwan's eyes and the despair in Yarrow Junting's eyes appeared in her mind. This was their deserved retribution, but it was far from enough. Master, something happened. This subordinate saw the esteemed prince holding a letter of unknown origin. He lost control and headed in the direction of the Cold Palace. Just as Yarrow Moen was deep in thought, Yin Shui suddenly appeared with a cold expression. Cold Palace? Let's go take a look. Yarrow Moen's eyes turned cold. She immediately put on a robe and strode out of Guan Osprey Palace. It was clearly the beginning of summer, but the night wind was so cold that it made one's heart shiver. Clouds covered the moon and the world was filled with a somber atmosphere. Yi Junqing stared at the side room in front of him and tightened his grip on the letter. His heart ached inexplicably. Right at this time, the door to the side room moved slightly. Yi Junqing's eyes lit up and he abruptly jumped to the side room's door and pushed it open. Who is it? Yi Junqing's voice was as cold as ice. Under the dim starlight, the haystack in the corner was trembling. Yi Junqing suddenly took a step forward and pulled off the haystack. To his astonishment, he saw a woman dressed like a palace maid looking at him with trembling eyes. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. I didn't see anything. I didn't. The palace maid's body was thin and her hair was disheveled. Her eyes, which were covered by her hair, were filled with fear. At this time, the palace maid was holding her head with both hands and begging bitterly. Who are you? What did you see? Yi Junqing looked around vigilantly. He was certain that the letter in his hand hadn't been written by this palace maid, but he knew that this palace maid definitely knew something. I didn't. I beg you, let me go. I really didn't see anything. Her Imperial Highness the Empress died from a difficult birth. The dragon seed died in the womb. No, no, no. The dragon seed only died when it was born. I beg you. The palace maid knelt on the ground as if she had gone mad. She spoke incoherently as she kowtowed with all her might. Just how did the dragon seed die? Just how did the Empress die? Tell me. The palace maid's words were filled with doubts. Yi Juanqing's heart trembled. He abruptly grabbed the palace maid and roared angrily. Chapter 97. Empress. Fart. The palace maid suddenly clutched her chest with both hands, her waxy face scrunched up even more. Then she coughed up a mouthful of black blood. What's wrong? Hey. What's wrong? You still haven't told me how the Empress died. Hurry and tell me. Yi Juanqing sealed the palace maid's meridians in an attempt to prolong her life. Unfortunately, the poison had entered her lungs and black blood poured out. Empress. Empress was. The palace maid's voice gradually weakened. Yi Juanqing abruptly leaned over and pressed his ear against the palace maid's mouth, but he still couldn't hear the palace maid's final words. Yi Juanqing slowly let go of the palace maid's corpse and let it fall to the ground. His heart was covered in frost. Even though he hadn't heard the palace maid's final words, Yi Juanqing was able to confirm one thing: Morxin's death wasn't as simple as it seemed. As for what secrets were hidden behind this, he swore that he would definitely get to the bottom of it. If Morxin had really been framed, then he, Yi Juanqing, swore to the heavens that he would definitely tear the people who had wronged Morxin to pieces. Yi Juanqing stared indifferently at the dead palace maid. It wasn't until the Z period that he was sure that the person who had written the letter had wanted him to see this palace maid. Now that the palace maid was dead, the person who had written the letter had become the only clue. When he thought up to this point, he took a deep breath, then put away the wrinkled letter he was holding and turned to leave. Master, this subordinate was careless and didn't notice that someone had entered the esteemed prince's room. In the darkness, Yin Shui looked towards Yarrow Moen apologetically. It has nothing to do with you. Yarrow Moen's eyes flashed coldly as she watched Yi Juanqing leave. Master, this subordinate will go in and see what exactly happened. Yin Shui was about to rush into the side room when Yarrow Moen stopped her. You can't go in. There's probably someone else here besides us. Let's go back first. We can't alert the enemy, said Yarrow Moen indifferently before turning to leave. Yin Shui looked around. Although she didn't sense anyone, she didn't dare to disobey. After returning to Guan Osprey Palace, Yarrow Moen sat at the table in the inner room and stared thoughtfully at the carved dragon candlestick. Master, why don't Yin Shui steal that letter? Suggested Yin Shui, knowing what Yarrow Moen was thinking. There's no need. Even if I don't look at the letter, I can guess what's written on it. There's nothing else here. You can leave now. Yarrow Moen's voice didn't contain the slightest hint of reproach. She had no reason to blame Yin Shui. After all, she couldn't split herself up and it was a bit difficult for her to take care of both herself and the esteemed prince. Yes. Yin Shui felt grateful for Yarrow Moen's leniency and immediately turned to leave. The room was silent. Yarrow Moen held the silver pick as she gently flicked the candle wick. The light in her eyes deepened. If her guess wasn't wrong, the contents of that letter definitely had something to do with the cause of her death. If that wasn't the case, Yi Juanqing wouldn't have gone to the former site of the Cold Palace. However, was there really someone in the Imperial Palace who knew the cause of her death? Who could it be? What was his goal? This was the most troublesome matter she had encountered since her rebirth. She couldn't let Yi Juanqing know the true cause of her death. Now wasn't the time yet. It seemed that she had to dig out this person before Yi Juanqing found out anything. The next day, as soon as Yarrow Moen got out of bed, she found out from Tingyu that the wing of the former site of the Cold Palace had already been burned to ashes. The fire had been too big, even the surrounding pine and cypress trees had been burned. This servant really doesn't understand. It's just an abandoned wing, how could it suddenly catch fire? There wasn't any thunder last night, so it definitely wasn't a heavenly fire. But who would be so bored as to start a fire there? If they were caught, they'd definitely be sentenced to death, said Tingyu as she set the table. Where's the fire? A clear and cold voice suddenly rang out. Yi Junqing was standing at the palace gates, his eyes cold and distant. Ah! Replying Prince, it's that wing of the cold palace, replied Tingyu truthfully. You can leave first. Yarrow Moen waved her hand to dismiss Tingyu and leisurely sat down at the table. Who do you think started the fire? Yi Junqing walked over to Yarrow Moen and asked in a low voice. His eyes clearly didn't have the usual leisurely expression. She had already expected this result, so she had tried her best not to let Yi Junqing know the truth too early. The sooner he found out, the more his heart would hurt. How would I know? Asked Yarrow Moen in response. There shouldn't be anything that happens in this palace that you don't know. Yi Junqing had always thought this way. Prince truly thinks highly of Moen. However, I might have to disappoint Prince. Moen really doesn't know about this matter. Yarrow Moen lowered her gaze as she ate. Regarding Yarrow Yu's matter, you killed 3 birds with 1 stone. Not only did you frame Yarrow Sulwan, you also made Yarrow Junting think that he lost his son. Furthermore, this matter happened in the inner palace, so it's hard for Yarrow Junting not to blame His Majesty. From this, it seems like you were trying to sow discord between the 3 of them. If you were an outsider, this prince could still use common sense to deduce your actions, but you just had to be Yarrow Junting's daughter, Yarrow Sulwan's younger sister, and Yi Hongyi's most beloved concubine. This prince just can't understand why you would do this. Unless... Yi Junqing hesitated as a thought flashed through his mind. If that thought was true, then his heart would definitely ache. Unless what? Yarrow Moen wanted to know what Yi Junqing was thinking. Unless you hate the 3 of them, and the reason you hate them is because of Morsheen. Yi Junqing swallowed hard. He had used an entire night to think through this matter, and this was his final answer. Prince's imagination is truly rich. Eldest sister died from a difficult birth, so if Moen were to accommodate His Majesty because of this, it would be a bit unreasonable. As for father, Moen had never been in his eyes since he was young. It's true that he didn't have any feelings for father, but it wasn't to the point of hatred. As for Yarrow Sulwan, she bullied Moen since she was young. Now that Moen has gained power, it's just an eye for an eye. Moen is aware of Prince's feelings towards eldest sister, but eldest sister has already left. Prince should learn to let go. Yarrow Moen coldly looked towards Yi Junqing. I knew you wouldn't admit it. As Yi Junqing listened to Yarrow Moen's pompous speech, he inwardly felt vexed. How could he have forgotten that this woman was extremely black-bellied? It was harder to get information out of her than to ascend to the heavens. Moen will tell me everything she knows. If Prince doesn't believe me, then Moen can't do anything about it. In a bit, after we finish eating, I hope that you can help me with something, said Yarrow Moen lightly. How could you have the nerve to ask? I don't have time. Yi Junqing couldn't help but sigh. Being thick-skinned really was a good thing. He wouldn't refuse someone and then turn around to ask for help. You eat my food and live in my place, so helping me isn't a loss, right? Said Yarrow Moen disapprovingly. Yi Junqing was instantly speechless. Perhaps he should consider Yang Nansheng's suggestion. As long as he found out the cause of Morsheen's death, he swore that he wouldn't stay for even a quarter of an hour longer. When Yarrow Moen brought Yi Junqing to Fragrant Steps Pavilion, Yu Funning was extremely surprised. When she saw Yi Junqing carrying Fluffy with her own eyes, Yu Funning had the urge to rush over and kick that little cat away. This concubine greets esteemed prince, greets consort Yao. Yu Funning quickly adjusted her emotions and walked lightly to Yi Junqing's side to greet them warmly. Big sister consort Xian, there's no need to be so polite. Last time, the ginseng soup you gave Fluffy was especially delicious. It's become so picky now. Big sister consort Xian, can you have them make another bowl for Fluffy? Yarrow Moen walked over and pulled on Yu Funning's hand with a pleading expression. Why not? Qian Shi, go tell the Imperial Kitchen to make a bowl of ginseng soup. Also, tell the Imperial Kitchen to prepare it well. Esteemed Prince and Consort Yarrow will have their lunch at Fragrant Steps Pavilion. Yu Fanning turned around to give this order to Qian Shi. She felt very bad inside. Back then, she had sent the ginseng soup for Yi Junqing to taste, but now, several hundred taels of ginseng soup had been taken advantage of by an animal. By Yarrow Moen's side, the corners of Yi Junqing's lips twitched. She really wasn't polite. Once Qian Shi left, Yu Fanning invited Yi Junqing to the seat of honor, then pulled Yarrow Moen over to the chaise longue. The moment she touched the chaise longue, Yarrow Moen realized that the chaise longue was cushioned with thousand-year-old profound ice jade. This kind of jade was warm in the winter and cool in the summer, so it was extremely rare. Even Yi Hongyi probably didn't have the fortune to enjoy it. Chapter 98. Then shouldn't you be a bit quieter when you speak? No matter how unwilling he was, Yi Junqing didn't move. He just sat there quietly like a dazzling statue. Oh, that's right. Big sister consort Xian, let's speak quieter. Yarrow Moen nodded in realization and covered her mouth with both hands as she looked towards Yu Fanning seriously. Seeing Yarrow Moen like this, Yi Junqing finally understood that the most painful thing in the world wasn't having a famous war god hug a cat to sleep, it was having to act with a woman who was even more shrewd than a monkey. No matter how much consort Yarrow likes it, it's still just a cat. Prince will get tired of hugging it like this. Yu Fanning's long eyelashes trembled slightly as she tried her best to endure it. She couldn't tolerate Yi Junqing's meekness and Yarrow Moen's bullying. The world had been turned upside down. A fool could actually control the invincible war god. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she really would have thought that she was having a nightmare. It can't be. He's already used to hugging it, don't worry. Oh right, where were we just now? Yarrow Moen's harmless smile was like a demon's in Yu Fanning's eyes. During lunch, if Qian Shi hadn't used the ginseng soup to stir up the glutton in Fluffy's stomach, who knew how long Yi Junqing would still be sitting there? At the dining table, other than Yarrow Moen, who was nagging non-stop, Yu Fanning and Yi Junqing were both deep in thought. Even after they left Fragrant Steps Pavilion, Yarrow Moen didn't forget to have Yi Junqing drink the rest of the ginseng soup while hugging the cat. How could Prince do something like this? Qian Shi, bring the ginseng soup over and send the esteemed Prince and consort Yarrow back to Guan Osprey Palace. Yu Fanning's heart ached when she saw Yi Junqing's sorry state. She hated Yarrow Moen even more for how Yi Junqing had swallowed his anger. How could Wanna trouble big sister consort Xian's people? It's fine, he's already used to it. Yarrow Moen's used to it caused Yu Fanning's hatred to rise to the peak. Once Yarrow Moen left, Yu Fanning suddenly turned around and flipped the phoenix table again. Your Highness, why bother with a fool? Your health is more important. Qian Shi comforted. This time, she didn't dare say a single bad word about Yi Junqing. Does a fool have the right to bully others? Didn't you see how badly she bullied the esteemed prince? This won't do. This consort can't watch the esteemed prince suffer like this again. Fail 1. Just as Yu Fanning finished speaking, a hidden guard dressed in black suddenly appeared beside her. Your Highness, please reconsider. Who could guarantee that the esteemed prince wasn't putting on a show for His Majesty? If you touch Yarrow Moen, His Majesty might take his anger out on the esteemed prince. At that time, wouldn't you be making a fool of yourself by trying to be clever? Qian Shi hurriedly explained when she saw Yu Fanning call out a flying one. Yu Fanning's eyebrows relaxed slightly. She waved her hand to dismiss the flying bird and subconsciously looked at Qian Shi. You think so? Your Highness, don't forget that the esteemed prince went to the wing of the Cold Palace last night. He must have seen Q. According to what Fail One heard, although Q didn't have time to tell the esteemed prince who killed Yarrow Morshin, she still mentioned Nurse Sun, Eunuch Zheng, and Yuner's names. As long as the esteemed prince continues to investigate this, he'll find out the cause of Yarrow Morshin's death sooner or later. Your Highness, why don't you wait until then to lend the esteemed prince a hand? Qian Shi analyzed calmly. You're right. Then we'll let Yarrow Moen live for a while longer. Yu Fanning's gaze was cold as she spoke through clenched teeth. At the side, Qian Shi's eyes gradually darkened. When she had told Master's thoughts, Master's orders had been completely different from Master's. It had truly been hard on her. In the imperial garden, Yarrow Moen took Fluffy from Yi Juanqing's arms and took a stroll, admiring the beautiful scenery around her. Why did you have to belittle this prince in front of consort Xian? Yi Juanqing knew that Yarrow Moen always did things with a goal in mind. I was helping you so that you wouldn't get into an unnecessary romantic debt. Yet you still don't know how to be grateful. Yarrow Moen said resentfully, but she had other thoughts in mind. Back in the imperial garden, Yu Funning's words seemed to imply that she knew about the incident in the cold palace. It seemed that she also knew about last night's incident. However, Yarrow Moen needed evidence. Nonsense. Yi Juanqing replied concisely. Don't you feel that the way consort Xian looks at you is very different? If I'm not wrong, she hasn't just loved you for a day or two. Yarrow Moen moved closer to Yi Juanqing and said this seriously. The more you say it, the more ridiculous it is. This prince has already helped you, so can you help this prince with something now? When facing Yarrow Moen, there were benefits to being a bit more thick-skinned. Yi Juanqing wanted to give her a taste of her own medicine. No. Yarrow Moen's reply was straightforward. Why? Yi Juanqing's eyes widened in anger as he cursed inwardly. Because Moen didn't eat or stay at your place. Also, did you forget how you scolded Moen that night? Yarrow Moen stopped walking and turned to look at Yi Juanqing. Her eyes were sparkling and pure, as beautiful as an illusion. Cough cough. You also seem to hold a grudge against this prince. Yi Juanqing looked towards Yarrow Moen, completely speechless. I'm not holding a grudge, I'm calculating. The corners of Yarrow Moen's lips lifted slightly, then she carried Fluffy away. How could I hold a grudge against you? I'll only remember your good deeds. What difference does it make? Yi Juanqing said hatefully as he watched Yarrow Moen's figure gradually disappear into the distance. After a long while, Yi Juanqing took a deep breath and his expression became solemn. He still remembered that the three people the palace maid had mentioned last night were Nurse Sun, Eunuch Zheng, and Yun. What he needed to do now was to investigate the identities of these three people. However, although he was in the imperial palace, his movements didn't change. There were some places he couldn't go. He had originally hoped that Yarrow Moen could help him, but now it seemed that he could only wait until nightfall. As a woman, Yarrow Moen could feel that Yi Hongyi's love for her had already surpassed that of all the concubines in the inner palace. In other words, she could faintly feel that Yi Hongyi's true feelings towards her had moved. However, the more it was like this, the more Yarrow Moen found it laughable. Back then, she had done everything for him, but she hadn't received the slightest bit of pity from him. Now, she had done everything for him, but he had poured his heart out for her. The night wind blew in, causing the light pink curtains to sway and the bed to sway violently. Due to the matter with Yarrow Yu, Yi Hongyi understood Yarrow Moen's feelings and endured it for 10 days before touching her again. At this time, Yi Hongyi was attacking the city and plundering the land to his heart's content, but no matter how he looked at it, he couldn't see through the heart of the person beneath him. Your Majesty, can Wan return to the residence tomorrow? Yarrow Moen lay on Yi Hongyi's chest as she looked towards the sweating man in front of her with a pleading expression. You can, but you can't stay overnight. We will miss you. Yi Hongyi never refused Yarrow Moen's requests. Your Majesty is the best. Yarrow Moen leaned into Yi Hongyi's embrace coquettishly, but her heart was cold to the extreme. The next day, when Yarrow Moen returned to Yarrow Xiongfu, the entire Yarrow Xiongfu was lifeless. Even the servants who cleaned the courtyard were dispirited, as if they hadn't eaten. It was no wonder that other people were living and the population was increasing, but Yarrow Xiongfu was decreasing. Right now, the only master left in this fu was Yarrow Zhenting. There wasn't anything to be busy with. Third miss. This old servant kowtows in salute to consort Yarrow Niang. Why didn't anyone inform you that you had returned? This old servant could have made preparations. When he saw Yarrow Moen, Yarrow Tu's face was filled with unconcealable excitement. Yarrow Moen knew that if there was one person in this Yarrow Xiongfu who missed her and was worthy of her attention, that person was Yarrow Tu. Anything is fine. Yarrow Moen nodded slightly. Where's father? Old master hasn't gone to court these past few days. He's been locking himself in little young master's room all day. He's only gotten better since yesterday. Right now, he should be in the main hall. Yarrow too sighed. Is that so? The son he cared about so much had only been sad for a few days. He really wasn't just cold-blooded. If she hadn't gotten news from Liu Xing that Yarrow Zhenting's condition had improved slightly, Yarrow Moen wouldn't have chosen to come back today. She really didn't want to give Yarrow Zhenting the slightest chance to breathe. Father. Yarrow Moen took a deep breath, then skipped into the main hall. As expected, Yarrow Zhenting was sitting there, sipping tea. Moen, why have you come back? Seeing that only Tingyu was behind Yarrow Moen, Yarrow Zhenting didn't get up to salute and just spoke indifferently. Moen missed father and also missed Shu mother. Oh right, Moen also brought a lot of pastries from the palace. Yu is gone, father's heart must be very bitter. After eating these pastries, you won't feel bitter anymore. Yarrow Moen took the pastries from Tingyu's hands and placed them on the red sandalwood table. You're quite filial. Yarrow Zhenting looked at this foolish daughter in front of him and couldn't help but sigh. Tingyu, go call Shu mother over as well. Tell her that Wna brought good food for her. Yarrow Moen turned around and ordered. There's no need, your Shu mother went to a very far place and won't be coming back. Yarrow Zhenting didn't want to waste his breath explaining to Yarrow Moen, you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.